Suddenly, there was a rustling sound behind them. Robert shouted, "Who is it? Who's there?" A woman, sweating profusely, exclaimed, "I'm sorry, Countess of Arno." Bianca recognized her. It was Lady Bolne. But why was she here? Don't tell me she was spying on me and planning to spread rumors. Bianca glanced at Robert with concern, but someone else approached and noticed Bianca. "Oh my, you're still here, Countess of Arno?" Bianca's eyes widened. "Princess Odeli?" Odeli, dressed in the attire of a radiant country girl, asked cheerfully, "Did you enjoy the flower arranging?" Her appearance left Bianca stunned. The elegance was so overwhelming it was almost intimidating. Truly, she was the most noble woman in Lahaz. Odeli gently began, "I heard that the Crown Prince Gautier lent the princess's garden to the Countess of Arno for flower arranging practice. I didn't expect her flower arranging teacher to be this young man. You're Robert, aren't you?" Robert was startled and blushed shyly. It turned out that a few years ago, he was the knight who had presented a rose to the princess. Odeli extended her hand, indicating that she wanted him to kiss it. Blushing even more, Robert responded, "Yes, Your Highness. It is an honor that you remember my name." Odeli reminisced, "Back then, you had no one to give the flower to, so you gave it to me, right?" Seeing them talk so cheerfully, Bianca felt a pang of regret for missing the previous tournaments and not watching them with everyone. Suddenly, Odeli exclaimed, "Meeting like this must be fate, don't you think? Could you take this with you?" Odeli cut a rose and said gently, "You were given an everlasting rose by your husband, weren't you? But the roses I grow with love will always keep their beauty. A white rose also suits this night very well." Robert blushed as he accepted the flower. "Princess, thank you," he said. Bianca was excited. "So, all the roses in this garden are personally tended to by your highness?" Odeli replied, "Of course. Nowadays, the maids help out too. This is my garden, after all. Whether the flowers bloom or wither, live or die, isn't it me who knows exactly?" Odeli expressed her eagerness to see them both at the flower arranging lesson the next day. Bianca was delighted, feeling honored to be the only noblewoman personally gifted a flower by the princess. Robert was also very happy to be the only knight to receive such a beautiful flower from her. "You don't need to worry about that girl anymore. My maid will not disclose anything that happened in this garden." Hearing these words, Bianca respected the princess even more. It turned out that Odeli was both gentle and strong. Bearing royal blood, she was undoubtedly a capable person who could support the emperor just as well as her brothers. Walking a while, they finally reached the three men who greeted her warmly. Seeing Bianca holding a bouquet of fresh roses, Zachary leaned in and whispered in her ear, "Who gave you those roses?" Bianca replied, "They were a gift from the most noble person in Lahaz." Seeing the close relationship between the Count and Countess, Count Blanchefort felt very relieved. "No matter what happens, with the Count by Bianca's side, I feel very reassured." Hearing this, Bianca immediately felt downcast. Even though Sefranca and Aragon are currently at peace, war could break out at any moment. Zachary, noticing her words, became a bit skeptical. "Are you saying that war might break out soon?" Bianca hesitated and said, "What about Johann, and father, and the entire Blanchefort family? If everyone has to join the war again, what will we do?" Zachary suddenly noticed her trembling. "If there are no mandatory orders for everyone to join the war, please don't go to battle." Her father remained silent, unable to find words. But her brother Johann responded frankly, "That's something I can't agree to, because the Blanchefort family serves the royal family, and voluntarily joining the fight is a given." Johann smiled proudly, "It's also my pride and the pride of our entire family as knights." Bianca couldn't say anything. Seeing his wife so distressed, Zachary gently stroked her back and comforted her, "My wife always feels uneasy when I'm on the battlefield. If something happens to me, the only people Bianca can rely on are the two of you. Please, do as Bianca wishes." Bianca looked at her husband with happiness in her eyes. "Only then can I go to the battlefield with peace of mind." Father and son looked at each other. After the Count's words, the father could only happily accept the proposal. As the two of them left, Bianca tightly held her husband's hand. "Thank you as well, my husband." But then Zachary asked in a cold voice, "Bianca, where did you hear about the upcoming war?" Bianca's heart skipped a beat and her eyes widened in fear as she looked up at her husband and heard him say, "Do you have something you want to tell me?" Ever since Bianca mentioned something like lace, Zachary couldn't help but feel suspicious. When she said it would become famous worldwide, not just on this continent, and even now when she brought up the possibility of Aragon invaders threatening the borders of the Sefranca Empire, Zachary knew his wife was hiding something. Was it just a coincidence? This time, it even concerns human lives. It's as if when Bianca predicts something that hasn't happened yet, I believe that someday it will come true. Especially concerning Aragon, I've received reports about this matter. Bianca's urgent concerns sound vague, but her demeanor is strangely unsettling. Why is that? Zachary held tightly onto his wife's hand and asked, Bianca, is there something you want to tell me? Bianca jumped in surprise, her eyes wide with fear as she looked up at her husband hesitantly. Zachary's expression hardened. Are you hesitating? Bianca still doesn't fully trust me. In the private chamber of the Arno ducal couple in the palace, Sover welcomed Robert back warmly. However, Robert's reminder and the disappointed looks from the couple behind him suggested a strange atmosphere. Sover was about to ask, but he only saw Bianca throw a bouquet towards Robert and leave him to his own devices. Sover hesitantly asked, Are they arguing again? Robert replied, I don't know either. Since I returned here, they haven't spoken to each other. What did they talk about in the garden? At this moment, Bianca still held that shy demeanor, having missed the chance to explain herself to her husband. Perhaps he had realized something, but would he believe what she said? Could he trust all of it? Thinking only of how the future might unfold and how the Duke had died, Bianca's heart pounded like a drum. Isn't it ironic? I love him so much, yet I can't trust him? Bianca pondered silently, contrasting her husband with Fernand, who had betrayed her in the past. But if the Duke's reaction isn't what I predict, he will surely be hurt. Is he prepared for that? With a lump in her throat, Bianca contemplated stepping forward to explain herself. However, Zachary intervened, Bianca, perhaps you've forgotten that I am a patient man. If you're not ready, I want to say that I can wait. He scratched his face, blushing slightly, I apologize for bringing this up so late. Bianca was surprised that her husband would be so accommodating. Zachary, I want to love you now, she said. Zachary jumped and blushed, it's midday. She wrapped her arms around his neck and said, I just want to be close to you quickly. Bianca kissed him on the lips and whispered to herself, if I can't trust the Duke, then just loving him more will do. If we get closer and there's no more emptiness in my heart, then surely I can tell him everything without hesitation. Sangham Sao, Princess Odeli received the mentioned lace handkerchief. Due to her various duties, Bianca was a bit delayed, but she still wanted to gift the handkerchief to the princess and the grand prince, as well as those beloved by the court. Odeli turned to the blonde-haired girl nearby and asked, May I gift that to the child? Bianca gladly agreed, they have left my hands, so I don't mind who the princess gifts them to. Odeli smiled gently in response. Could the lady spare some time for me this weekend? Would you like to go on a date with me? In the dimly lit room, the man gazed at a childhood photo of Bianca and spoke, Count Wigu, is my Bianca still learning flower arranging in Odeli's garden? Yes, sir. Jacob replied, the man sighed, Count Arno, how does he know the one place where I cannot pry my eyes and ears into, that little Odeli's garden? Blushing, he quietly hoped, when can we meet freely again? I miss you dearly, my Bianca. Returning to the princess's garden, Odeli continued to coax Bianca about dating, and the main destination was Laha's Grand Cathedral. Bianca had never been there before, and since she was soon returning to Odeli's domain, the princess wanted to accompany her to visit the Grand Cathedral and offer prayers. Bianca, surprised, asked, prayers? Odeli went on, I always pray for the peace of the kingdom and his majesty. And for those who were once my fosterlings, I pray for them, as well as for the Grand Prince, my brother, and Anbert. And the lady too, right? Those important to you, whom you want to offer prayers for. Bianca held her hand tightly with excitement. Back in their private room, she recounted the story to the Duke and expressed her desire to accompany the princess to the Grand Cathedral this weekend. Zachary thought it was a good idea, as he didn't have much time to take her anywhere until they returned to their territory. He teasingly remarked, seems like it suits you well with the princess, huh? She must be tired from her flower arranging lessons. Are you helping her with the gardening too? Bianca exclaimed, I didn't expect that to make my hand swell up like this. The princess is doing it too, so I think I can do it while chatting away. She knew that the emperor's children were always at the forefront of trends, such as the crown prince being the first to wear glasses in Sevfranca. The second prince initiated the leopard cloak trend in Luz. As for the princess, she was someone whom the young ladies of Sevfranca aspired to emulate. In short, all three royal siblings were fond of dressing up and paying great attention to their appearance, sometimes causing them to focus more on their own beauty than on those around them. The princess herself felt sorry for her sister-in-law when her brother spent his days strutting around like a peacock. Many men, after marrying a beautiful and glamorous woman, often treat them as trophies, binding them in a marriage that ends up feeling distant and detached. However, when they attend events where they need to show off themselves, like banquets, they fear losing face, so they want their wives to dress beautifully and flaunt their appearance, to be by their side, and to crave the admiration of others. It's a terrible thing about marriage, just for the sake of both families' interests, that is happening in Sevfranca. For their own success, they just got married. They don't care what their wives want. These men just want to show off themselves through their clothes and their achievements. Meanwhile, the young ladies after getting married will be very disappointed. They then will give their affection to other men, only to be discovered in an affair and driven out of the territory. Bianca felt a pang through her whole body upon hearing this. That's exactly why I've been delaying marriage, she said. Even if I were to marry, I'd still feel lonely. I might even have to pay attention to my husband's gaze if I want to show off my luxury. That's why I just want to stay by the Grand Prince forever and act childish to enjoy this extravagance. She recounted Princess Odele's words. Zachary finished wrapping his wife's hand while saying, every now and then, His Majesty Gautier mentioned that when Princess Odele was your age, she was quite a feisty girl. Bianca was happy as she recalled at the victory celebration, despite some discomfort, I managed to turn the situation around and even showcase my product. Perhaps that's why the princess took notice and wants to befriend me more. Zachary said nothing, just stroking his wife's fingers. Seems like you really enjoyed your time with Princess Odele, huh? His expression was that of a lost puppy, his fingers fidgeting as if pondering something. Bianca understood her husband's thoughts. She clasped the count's hand and consoled him, feeling the absence of any sisters in the house with whom to share such matters. Given that Princess Odele doesn't mind age differences, Bianca also hoped to become her good friend in the future. She leaned into her husband and gently said, so please don't be jealous anymore, Zachary. Bianca rubbed her nose against his, causing the Baron to blush. With that reassurance alone, Zachary softened, and loved her even more. That night, Bianca quietly resolved to do something. She needed evidence to support her recollections of her past. Therefore, besides memories, Bianca needed something concrete so that she could confidently tell Zachary everything. It seems like you're reflecting on a moment of prayer and a plea for another chance before death, promising not to betray Zachary or neglect your responsibilities to the territory. Now, as you face an examination of your past and seek confirmation, you wonder if your prayers for redemption were heard by the divine. At the Grand Cathedral of Lajas, during a solemn ceremony where the high priest was deeply focused, a young man entered, causing the old priest to turn back and force a fake smile. Immediately, he reproached the priest John for disrupting his concentration on prayer. The old man exclaimed in frustration as he pondered the cathedral's offerings. The Holy Father will surely remember that the offering from the Grand Cathedral of Lajas last year was a masterpiece, requiring at least 20 skilled craftsmen from various fields to complete the Chezikban within 3 years. Therefore, we must present something more groundbreaking than the Chezikban, especially with the upcoming selection of the Cardinal next year. This time, we must impress the Holy Father with our offering. The old chief priest replied bluntly, no, it only demonstrates my own success and prestige. This is a major event, Father John. He continued to embellish and then pointed directly at Father John, wanting him to provide a legitimate reason for interrupting him during prayer time. The chief priest is a very difficult person to schedule meetings with, unless there is something that attracts his attention. Otherwise, he becomes quite irritable. So when he saw Bianca's box, he thought she only wanted to use the princess's name to send him ordinary gifts. But Father John showed him something even more miraculous than the Chezikban. This is the first item in my life that I have seen. The chief priest was curious and looked up. Then he startled himself, exclaiming, this is a candle depicting the apparition of the Virgin Mary, with a gentle and serene appearance. It is so exquisite that looking at it makes one feel as if the Virgin Mary herself is present. He grasped the box and called out loudly, Father John, what is the name of that lady? Outside the chapel hall, someone had already exclaimed, Countess Arno. The girl with orange hair, who had rushed past before upon seeing Bianca standing there, turned out to be Countess d'Aveville. Odele also showed up. Oh my, it's Catherine. So glad to see you. Catherine was taken aback to find the princess here too. It turns out she was still concerned about the last party and wanted to come here to apologize in person. Bianca couldn't resist accepting this apology either. Catherine was delighted to hear that and suddenly took Bianca's hand, loudly proclaiming, then Countess Arno, you must become my friend. Hearing the words, friend, Bianca was surprised and blushed deeply. Friends? What are friends? I have Yvonne, Sover, Vincent already, can they be called friends? Odele looked at both of them with interest. You two are around the same age, so becoming friends would be good. Why not take this opportunity to become friends? Both Bianca and Catherine widened their eyes at this straightforward suggestion. Bianca furrowed her brow and blushed, responding, "Sure, although I'm not very confident. So in the future, please help me out, Countess d'Avaville." Catherine was overjoyed and ecstatic, finally having become friends with Countess Arno. While they were engrossed in conversation, Father John approached and said, "Countess Arno, High Priest Francis is eager to meet you." As Bianca left with him, Catherine couldn't believe that she was getting a private audience with the High Priest, a person notoriously difficult to meet and incredibly reserved. Odeli also had to marvel at the situation. Even someone as noble as herself, a princess, rarely received an acknowledgement from him. It seemed Bianca had handed the priest some kind of offering earlier. Whatever it was, it appeared that Countess Bianca had another secret weapon that they were unaware of. Inside, the high priest was visibly excited, holding up the item and insisting on knowing from Bianca where it was made. She wondered, sculptures on candles? Truly genius. Moreover, this is a stunning work of art. It is the finest sculpture I have ever seen. Seeing him so emotional, Bianca smiled with her eyes. I knew he would like it, she thought. Candle sculpting is something I heard about in my previous life. Moreover, it is an offering for the new craft competition. I thought it would catch the high priest's attention. Having a talent like Nicola in the Arno family is a tremendous blessing for me. Thank you, Nicola. You are truly a gift from God to me. The high priest, with tears in his eyes, insisted on knowing where he could find more of these products, as he wanted to present them to the Pope. Bianca replied, unfortunately, they are all back in Arno territory. However, if you wish, I can have some prepared upon request. He was overjoyed. Thank you, Countess. Your presence is like an answer to my prayers. The only thing I can offer you in return is my prayers. So, do you have any special wish you would like me to pray for? Bianca clenched her hands and responded, more than a prayer, I seek an answer to a special question, one that only you, High Priest, can clarify. Francis put on a confident expression. Go ahead and ask. I will clarify it for you. Bianca began, I want to know about the miracle of regression, returning to the past. Francis frowned. The miracle of regression? He responded bluntly, there is no such thing as regression, Countess. Bianca felt a pang of disappointment, but the high priest continued more precisely, in our congregations, we refer to something similar as foresight of the future. Bianca murmured, foresight of the future? Knowing this would be a long explanation, Francis poured tea for her and began to explain the concept of regression or foresight of the future. The distinction between the two is very subtle. Saints who could foresee the future often claimed that they had regressed to the past. The congregation defines it as a micro-level forecast of the future. He pointed to his head and continued, because it exists only in the minds of the saints, they deny it as regression and define it as foresight of the future. Since it cannot be taken out of their minds, the saints cannot use it as evidence. Therefore, it is believed that the gods grant these individuals a glimpse of the future through long dreams. Bianca murmured, that's true. Without evidence, it's naturally hard to believe. She fidgeted with her hands and continued to ask, have these prophetic dreams ever come true? The high priest responded, although there have been cases where it came true, there are more instances where it did not. If we consider this sugar cube to be an ideal future seen by the gods, then the remaining sugar cubes represent the non-ideal futures seen by the gods. The gods want to gift humanity the most ideal future. Therefore, they show a chosen person the worst of the non-ideal futures through a long dream. As a result, those chosen individuals often strive to live contrary to that dream, in an effort to create the ideal future that the gods desire. The congregation is also fully committed to helping these saints awaken from their long dreams after seeing the worst possible future, because that dream represents the future that the gods do not desire, Francis explained with a smile. Countess Arno, have you perhaps awakened from a long dream? Bianca, feeling uneasy, looked at him but couldn't find the words to respond. This shocking revelation made him sweat and swallow hard. He thought, a noblewoman offering such a unique gift to please me, asking nothing else but about the miracle of foresight. His eyes gleamed with realization. I have discovered a saint. Old Francis was already deluding himself with dreams of becoming the Pope, having believed he had discovered a saint. Meanwhile, Bianca grew even more doubtful about herself. In her previous life, she wasn't devout, and her husband had criticized her for being wasteful, calling her a parasite. How could she possibly be a saint? Bianca pressed further, asking if it was possible to deceive using the Pope's power. Francis replied, of course, there have been such cases. Even among the popes, there's a distinction between true and false saints. If they are true, it's fine, but if they are false, they face very severe punishment for daring to insult the gods. Hearing this, Bianca's heart skipped a beat. No. Even with my connection to the war hero or my royal family ties, I can't defy the laws of religion, she thought. Bianca swallowed hard, thinking, I might implicate Arno if I seek evidence to prove this regression. Realizing she couldn't do anything more, Bianca prepared to leave, but Francis hastily stopped her. Countess, are you leaving already? His mind was filled with visions of the papal title slipping away. Trembling, he spoke, I am the high priest, Countess. If I can use a method to quickly verify this, what do you think? Even if you are not a saint, you will not be punished. Bianca hesitated but eventually agreed with him. Francis eagerly outlined a method to verify the existence of the saint named Chuksong, by marking the individual with the sacred seal. If they truly were a saint, the seal would appear as proof of authenticity. Bianca was genuinely worried. What if the seal doesn't appear? Should I consider that a stroke of luck? Being dishonest in my past life and betraying my husband makes that title a heavy burden indeed. But if I truly am a saint, could I become a strength for Zachary? Francis gently spoke, did you know, Countess, that doves are sacred creatures, conveying the divine will? They also carry the commandments of the divine spirit. He continued, tell me, Countess of Arno, what kind of future do you desire? Bianca teared up, clutching her hands tightly, and earnestly replied, I want a future where my husband, Zachary de Arno, does not die. In the presence of the saint, Francis announced that the congregation would soon publicize their existence, and if the saint needed assistance, the congregation would be ready to support. The name of the saint would also be inscribed on the church records. Francis, caught up in his elation, was taken aback when Bianca uttered a statement that made him feel as if he had fallen into a deep abyss. For now, I don't want anyone to know that I am a saint, not even my husband. Can you help me keep my identity hidden? Internally dismayed, Francis exclaimed, why would you say that? Externally composed, he continued persuasively, if your status as a saint were revealed, your husband, the central figure of that prophecy, Count Arno, would listen to the saint more attentively. Why would you choose to conceal this? Bianca thinks differently. She doesn't see herself as some extraordinary figure who can create something with a touch of her fingers or destroy something with light from her forehead. Even if I am in the sanctuary, I am just a normal person. And if my husband listens to me only because I am a saint, it would be bitterly disappointing. When Bianca returned home, upon seeing Yvonne, she immediately embraced the maid tightly, leaving everyone bewildered. It seemed all the burdens were weighing heavily on her small shoulders, and with that, Bianca retired for the night. The next day, she finished her flower arranging class with Robert and spent time with her friends Princess Odeli and Countess Davaville, who reluctantly bid her farewell as she returned to her territory. Princess Odeli reached out to gently touch Bianca's cheek, saying, remember, when times are tough, lean on your friends. Bianca responded softly, thank you, your highness. Today, both the emperor and the crown prince personally escorted the Arno count and countess back to their home. If it weren't for the princess intervening with the emperor, he might not have allowed them to leave the palace, and so the group began their long journey back to the territory. Before departing, Bianca caught a glimpse of a figure, the second prince. She clenched her teeth in anger, muttering to herself, just wait, second prince. I'll never allow myself to be drawn into the future you desire. That night, the Arno entourage had to sleep under the stars, all because the emperor detained them for too long. Bianca sat inside the carriage, lost in her thoughts. Francis said he would inform everyone that a saint had passed away in Sfarang, but would keep the person's identity secret. Bianca whispered to herself, while Francis is buying time for himself, I need to let my family know about this. Bianca, is there something you need? Just as she thought about him, the count appeared right beside her. Bianca turned away, why aren't you asking anything, your grace? Have you heard Robert tell the story about my encounter with the high priest? Why aren't you asking anything, Zachary? Bianca asked. I said I'll wait for you to tell me, whenever you're ready, Zachary replied. Bianca smiled happily, playfully tugging at his shirt. Today we'll be sleeping in the carriage, right? Sleeping alone outside at night would be cold, and if I catch a cold while we're still on this long journey, what would we do? Zachary heard this and blushed, not knowing what to say. He walked away, leaving behind a remark, you go ahead and sleep first. Bianca murmured, I'll wait for you. Zachary went outside and told everyone not to bother preparing a place for him to sleep. But Sova replied, sure, we weren't planning to prepare for you anyway. Aren't you going to sleep with the lady, after all? Zachary felt embarrassed. So that's why Yvonne is sitting here? Zachary turned away, murmuring to himself, so this relationship has become obvious to everyone else. The count bid everyone good night and turned to leave promptly, visibly pleased. As he returned to the carriage, Zachary was surprised to see a rather awkward scene. Bianca had already prepared a warm sleeping spot for him, and she greeted him with a mischievous smile, saying, "Come in, my dear husband. I've been waiting for you." Zachary quickly jumped onto the carriage and slammed the door shut. He was sweating profusely and blushing with embarrassment as he scolded, "What's this? Hold on, if someone else saw us, what would happen? It's cold, and dressed like this, what if I catch a cold?" Bianca replied nonchalantly, "Well, you did warm me up, didn't you?" Zachary exploded upon hearing this. "I'm a man with a weak heart, so please refrain from doing things like this." "So you don't mind?" The Count flinched when she added, "If we're discreet, they won't notice." Zachary couldn't hold back any longer. He kissed her soft lips and responded to her invitation, honestly. "We've already slept in the dust, and now we're doing this here. In front of you, I've completely lost my patience," Zachary added. Sover was enjoying himself, quite tipsy outside, but he blushed when he noticed what was happening in the carriage. He silently wished the couple well and then draped his arm over Robert's shoulder, cheerfully saying, "Looks like we'll become old uncles this year." Robert, who probably knew what was going on, simply advised him to finish his drink quickly and go to sleep. One morning at Arno Manor, the steward was unusually cheerful and radiant, even dancing a little in his steps. The household staff around couldn't help but gossip, thinking that upon the return of the lady of the house, he would be melancholic. However, due to the successful sale of lace that brought substantial wealth to the estate, he was simply joyous. Furthermore, observing the relationships among the masters, anyone could see that things had changed significantly. Vincent cheerfully cleared his throat and knocked on the door, addressing the lady of the manor, "I am here, madam." Zachary groggily woke up, still half asleep, and noticed his wife clinging to him, reluctant to get up. Zachary approached her tenderly, "I wish you could sleep more, but I guess we have to prepare to receive guests, Bianca." After returning from Lajas, everyone could see that the two were a harmonious couple. In the courtyard of the Arno estate, the Count and Countess of Davaville came to visit the territory. As soon as they entered the drawing room, the Count of Davaville expressed interest in industrializing the lace-making industry and wanted to see the lace production process of the Arno territory. Bianca couldn't help but be surprised by this proposal. Reflecting on it, in her past life, among the noble families of Grand Prince Gautier and even when the second prince ascended the throne, the only family that wasn't purged was the Davaville family. Marceau, the son-in-law of House Davaville, truly is a prominent figure in social circles. She acknowledged his keen observation skills, recognizing that he understood the power over lace production rested with her. Therefore, he deliberately approached her directly instead of going through Zachary. She smiled to herself, thinking, perhaps I should form an alliance with such a clever ally quickly. Vincent nodded and escorted the two men to the tannery while the ladies spent time together. Turning to Marceau, Bianca said, "Would you care to join us, Count Marceau Davaville? I would be delighted to discuss industrialization with you." Right after the gentleman left, Catherine sat down and had a lengthy conversation with Bianca. There was something Bianca couldn't resist sharing, the gift that the Grand Prince had presented to the Holy See. They are currently scouring for it and are shouting a very high price. Besides, there is also a very wonderful rumor in the Vatican. Catherine joyfully exclaimed, "I hear he's appeared." "A saint?" Zachary, on the other hand, learned of the news through ghosts several hundred years ago. Marceau replied, "That's right, but who is he? What's the identity of a saint with powers?" The great cathedral of Lajas did not reveal a word. It is predicted that the holy person will appear around late spring to early summer. My wife Catherine said that the Countess of Arno met the great sage. I want to ask if you heard the story of the saint at that time, do you know about that or not? But Marceau suddenly hesitated when he saw the Countess of Arno standing quietly, recalling what she had said, "Did you not ask me what happened?" Zachary's eyes widened and he gasped in astonishment. The reason Bianca met the Grand Sage, could it be? His series of expressions were quickly noticed by the astute Count of Arno. "I've heard that he is someone who remains calm and shows little emotion, isn't he? Seeing he's shaken like this, I wonder if my speculation is correct or not. If it were Francis boasting, as soon as he arrived at the Holy See, he would have asked the Pope's opinion and before that, he only met one person." Marceau turned and continued, stating that the Aragonese forces had proposed negotiations to cease hostilities. The reason being the appearance of that saintly figure. Zachary's eyes widened. Negotiations? So, they're willing to talk? Bianca, nearby, also overheard the talk of negotiations. Catherine responded to Marceau, acknowledging that the presence of the saintly figure on the enemy's side was a concerning issue for Aragon. "I don't know who this saintly figure is, but because of him, the Vatican is closely monitoring Sefranca," Catherine added, glancing meaningfully. In any case, without war, Marceau won't have to go to the battlefield, she concluded with a hint of relief. It seems like Catherine is expressing her worries about Marceau potentially going to battle and the implications for their family's future. She mentioned that since they haven't had children yet, if something terrible were to happen to Marceau in combat, her father wouldn't allow her to become a widow, as the Davaville family needs an heir. Bianca feels a deep sense of empathy. She recalls Princess Odele's words in the Rose Garden about the benefits of having one or two close friends of the same age. She sees the value in such companionship, reflecting on her own experiences with Catherine. She's aware of how many noble families, driven by the desire to uphold their legacy, have treated the future of their children almost like a business transaction. Bianca asked her friend Catherine, "Do you love your husband?" Catherine immediately beamed and replied, "Yes, I do." Bianca was surprised by how quickly she answered. "The first time I met him, I was quite scared by his sharp gaze, but he turned out to be gentle and warm. He's always been there for me, so I can't imagine him dying or us not being husband and wife." Catherine finished her story with tears of happiness and envy. "I envy you so much, Bianca, because you don't have to worry about such things. The Duke of Arno is the strongest man on this continent, so whenever he goes to battle, he always returns victorious." She wiped her tears as she spoke. "By the way, Bianca, you still don't have children, right?" Bianca chuckled shyly, "Not because our relationship isn't good, just that the little one hasn't arrived yet." The Duke and Duchess of Arno had spent many nights in Lajas, but they hadn't yet had children for a reason. It seems like Bianca is really putting in the effort with her sword training under Robert's guidance. Despite her initial intention to attack, Robert's swift disarmament left her hands trembling. "You did well, my lady," he praised. Bianca's face flushed with frustration as she muttered to herself, "He's really pushing my buttons, isn't he?" Robert continued earnestly, "You no longer drop your sword. Moreover, even young knights find it challenging to wield a sword and charge like that. You did well, such actions show that you are courageous. A sword sharpened by a brave person often holds great strength. You will become stronger in the future, my lady." Bianca scoffed, "That's right. Just praise me like that, Robert, that's all it takes." Of course, that was just her imagination. The sword training session had ended. As she left the training area, she heard the laughter and chatter of children nearby. Bianca hurriedly asked, "What if war breaks out? What should the civilians outside the fortress do?" Robert replied, "We will notify them to evacuate to Arno Castle, my lady. From the outside, the castle may seem small, but we have enough space to accommodate everyone and distribute provisions. If enemies attack, we can hold out until the Count returns." Bianca felt sorrowful. Perhaps no one in this empire thinks Zachary will die on the battlefield. Does Zachary himself think so? In the study, Bianca couldn't focus, her mind consumed by these thoughts. Suddenly, she looked up and asked the steward, "Has the Lord left a will?" Vincent replied, "Certainly, he has prepared one, having been on the battlefield for quite some time." "Then please show me the will," Bianca insisted. Vincent's expression darkened. "Why do you wish to see the will?" Bianca insisted, "As his wife, I should know." Bianca's curiosity was piqued seeing Vincent's flustered demeanor. Why is he so hesitant? What exactly did he write in there? She promptly stood up and dashed to the bookshelf. "This one, right?" Vincent blocked her path and exclaimed, "Wait a moment." Bianca found Vincent's behavior quite obstructive. She turned to Gasper and asked, "Are you going to stop me too?" Gasper replied indifferently, "My duty is solely to ensure the lady's safety. Preventing harm to the lady is my responsibility." Bianca responded, "Very well then. Vincent is blocking my way ahead, so I might stumble. Please move him aside." Bianca replied, "Well then, since Vicent is blocking the way ahead, we might stumble. Tell him to step aside." Vicent could only cry out in anguish as Gasper effortlessly lifted him onto his shoulder. While restraining Vincent, Bianca found a peculiar box containing a letter, which she promptly opened to read. Bianca let go of Vincent's arms in anger and exclaimed, "I believe he acknowledged me as his wife to avoid contraception, this vile person." In the study of Count Arno, Vincent cautiously entered with a fearful and trembling expression. "What is the matter, steward?" he asked. Vincent replied darkly, "Ah, my lord, the matter is that madam has already read it, the will, sir." Upon hearing this, Zachary promptly left without a word, throwing open the doors of the room. A voice declared, "If Zachary dies childless, all the assets and land of the Arno family will go to the Blanchefort family, the biological parents of Bianca. Furthermore, the marital relationship between Bianca and Zachary will be annulled, and Bianca will return to the Blanchefort family." Zachary sighed heavily and looked embarrassed after being discovered by his wife. "Does father know about this?" Although the Blancheforts haven't contributed to Arno's development, all the assets and land belong to your family. It's truly shameless. And furthermore, our marital relationship will be annulled." Bianca glared at her husband. "So that's why you avoided having children, my Lord Count?" Zachary could only purse his lips, feeling betrayed by his wife's accusation. "Are you always prepared to send me back home? Even everyone in Sevfranca knows about our relationship now. Do you really want to annul this marriage?" Bianca continued, her tone sharp. Zachary sighed deeply and tightly gripped the will in his hand. "That's just a hypothetical scenario to some extent. As for sending you back to Blanchefort, I never considered it. The situation at the front is being discussed fervently, but that doesn't mean the war will end. You must understand that." He clenched his teeth, suppressing his emotions. "If I die in battle, just thinking about you being alone in Arno," Zachary began, gripping her hand tightly. "Even if I disappear, all I want is for you to be happy. How could I leave you here, trapped as the Countess of Arno, a title that stole your childhood?" he continued. Bianca exclaimed, "What chains are you talking about?" The Count interjected, "The reason I wanted to avoid pregnancy is different, it's because you're still too young. My mother, my father's second wife, from the Wigu family, came to my father's house when she was young. After giving birth to me, she passed away due to childbirth complications. I don't want that to happen to you. I refuse to let you face such risks." Remembering back, Zachary had also embraced her after her inauguration ceremony. Perhaps he feared Bianca might not survive childbirth, like his mother did. Zachary continued to ask, "Do you have any reason why we should have children soon?" Seeing her husband appear eager for something, Bianca lacked the courage to tell him her story. Seeing her hesitation, Zachary reluctantly assured her he would give her more time to be ready. "You can trust me a little, Bianca." Yet again, she missed another chance to tell him the truth. Time passed in this manner until the Feast of All Saints began. The people throughout the territory eagerly prepared everything, creating a festive atmosphere filled with excitement. On this occasion, everyone also prepared gifts to present to the Count and Countess. They expressed their gratitude for the couple's care, especially towards Bianca. She had taught women how to make lace, turning them into artisans, which made their husbands deeply grateful. Bianca also didn't hesitate to accept that sincere gesture. Since that day, Zachary only dared to say a few words to his wife, like, "It suits you very well." Blushing, Bianca replied, "Thank you, my lord." The strange atmosphere between the two worried Yvonne, but a large hand rested on her shoulder, reassuring her. Today would undoubtedly be a day Yvonne would never forget. Gasper took her hand and knelt before her, in front of the watching crowd. Gasper confessed his proposal to the girl, and amidst tears, Yvonne accepted right there. At a surreal Sover checkpoint, Zachary remarked, "I never expected I'd be the last of us to marry." Robert quipped, "If you keep squandering money like this, how will you afford a wedding?" "Even so, I thought I'd marry before Gasper," Zachary replied. Robert nodded sympathetically at his friend's words. Robert also felt sympathetic. Suddenly, a cavalryman rode up swiftly. Robert widened his eyes as the soldier held a black flag with the emblem of the royal house of Sevfranca, a flag indicating sad news. Prince Gaudi had passed away from a fall from his horse in the capital city of Lajas, Sevfranca. Zachary hurriedly ran to the Grand Cathedral to attend the funeral of the prince. Count Blanchefort had already been there beforehand. Zachary wanted an audience with the emperor, but he refused to see anyone except his own princess. No one could have imagined that, although not the direct heir to the throne, Prince Gaudi was the most capable. In other countries, the eldest child being the heir is natural. Despite being granted authority, the position in Sevfranca remains vacant. If the emperor were to pass away, the situation would become even more complicated. This is because Gaudi's children would have to contend for power with the second prince, Jacob, who is still too young to govern the country, while the second prince remains actively involved in politics. All the nobles have been considering this matter. If Aragon learns the reason for the prince's death, they will likely look down on Sevfranca. It's heard that he fell from his horse due to drunkenness. Jacob now enters and mocks, well, perhaps the horse was drunk too at that time. Seeing Zachary, he smirks and asks, "Long time no see, Count Arno. How are you? And how is my Bianca?" Zachary gritted his teeth, suppressing the fiery anger within. While everyone was unsure of what to do, just as Prince Gaudi, who stood to negotiate the peace agreement of the war with Aragon, a soldier rushed in with urgent news. "It's big news. Aragon has attacked." This shocking news left everyone horrified, with Jacob smirking mockingly behind their backs. Meanwhile, at the Arno estate, Bianca could only mourn the death of Prince Gaudi. During the ongoing war, in her past life, both her elder brother Johann and her father had perished on the battlefield. Now, everything had changed to an unpredictable extent. While sinking into her thoughts, Yvonne announced that the Lord had returned home. Bianca was startled, thinking, he's back already after just 15 days? Anxiety surged through her, prompting her to rush outside to see what had happened. Seeing her husband below, Bianca hurried to him to ask, "Are you preparing for war?" Zachary, busy directing others, didn't want to talk to her right now. "Bianca, wait," he said, turning to tell Gasper to talk privately elsewhere. Unable to disturb him, Bianca could only worry and anxiously watch her husband. Is he preparing for war? Bianca grew increasingly nervous. Her chest tightened, making breathing difficult. In the end, Aragon will invade. The prince's accident has disrupted the peace talks. Aragon's continuation of war is all his doing. Her eyes grew blurry, and the image of Lord Zachary faded away and disappeared. Suddenly, an arm grabbed her, and he tauntingly and teasingly said, "Hey, cheer up, Bianca." Bianca widened her eyes. "You're the second prince," she said, "the one who always said, 'I'll make sure you always think of me.'" Bianca clenched her teeth in anger, grabbed his collar, and shouted, You killed the prince and instigated Aragon's invasion, didn't you?" Her gaze turned empty. "Indeed, you killed him. When we were in Lajas, I said it, didn't I, Jacob?" In her delirium, Bianca muttered, "I should have killed you." When she opened her eyes, Bianca found her husband right beside her. "You fainted suddenly, do you remember?" he asked gently. Since then, Bianca had been unconscious for about an hour. Perhaps due to shock, she couldn't endure it and collapsed like that. Looking up at her husband, Bianca asked, "You have to go to battle, don't you?" Zachary looked at her with sorrow. His silence only heightened her anxiety. "It's the worst," she thought. "Because of the will, I haven't been able to have an honest conversation with you for 2 months, and now I faint just as you must go to battle tomorrow morning." Zachary reassured, "Do not worry, I will win and return as always." Surprised, Zachary asked, "Why are you so certain?" Bianca remained silent for a while before explaining, "I can't tell you, it's because for a long time, I haven't been a good companion to you." Bianca leaned on, tears in her eyes, and replied, "This time may not be like before. You might die, Zachary." Zachary gripped her shoulders and asked, "Not a good companion? How so? When did this start?" Bianca replied, "I've lived in a world where you were absent, this is my second life, Zachary." Zachary's eyes widened in realization, the lacework, the war with Sevfranca. So this strange feeling I've sensed from Bianca all this time. To be someone who foresees the future but sees that future slowly changing. A prime example is Prince Gosha's fall and Zachary's impending military involvement this time around, uncertain of what changes may come. Yet Bianca still hopes he won't go there. Naturally, Zachary can't do that. He must protect the people of the Empire, including her. Bianca exclaimed, "Then you just need to stay in Arno. Send someone else to fight in your place." Zachary responded, "The problem is there's no one to replace me. I'm also unsure how the royal family will react after Prince Gosha's incident." Bianca exclaimed, "There is someone to replace you. I will request the Holy Knights to go to battle." Zachary widened his eyes. You would take on the mantle of a saint and ask them for aid?" Zachary couldn't believe what he was hearing. He held his head, murmuring to himself, "Heavens above, though I've often wondered, I never thought you'd be a saint." Bianca was surprised. "You knew? Why didn't you ask me about it?" Zachary replied, "It was my intuition and also hearing from others. I didn't want to unsettle you with uncertainties, as waiting is not difficult for me." He gently grasped her arm, "I just hope you won't hide anything from me and tell me everything openly." Zachary lowered his eyes and continued, "I thought that if I were a more reliable husband, you wouldn't feel the need to keep secrets." Bianca, in tears, shook her head and said, "It's not that I don't trust you. I will let you know how terrible and hateful I once was." Bianca slowly began to speak, crying all the while. She felt as if she were being sucked into a quicksand in this second life. "Will he resent me for living as his wife this way? That's the only thing I want to know." Zachary held her tightly, deeply pained, thinking, if I had known Bianca would suffer so much, almost to the point of coughing up blood because of such a truth, I would have waited my whole life. Bianca had tried to prevent the worst from happening in that future, but in the end, Zachary still had to join the battlefield. She hugged him tightly, sobbing, "Just imagining you not being by my side is already unbearable for me." Zachary's eyes widened. He blushed and quietly asked, "Bianca, I just wonder. Maybe it's my arrogant delusion, but..." He trembled, gathering all his courage, and asked, "Do you love me? Do you love me, even a little, Bianca?" Bianca shuddered and cried louder, really? How can you be so clueless? She stood up abruptly and shouted, if I didn't love you, who else could I love? Zachary felt as if he were standing at the pinnacle of happiness. He embraced her and gave her a sweet kiss. I'm not just by your side to change the future, she affirmed. Tears streamed down Zachary's face as he gently said, I love you. I love you with all my heart. Bianca knew that if war broke out, a man who abandoned the battlefield and fled would be considered a coward. Therefore, she wanted to ensure that he would return safely. Determined not to be sent back to Blanchefort, she resolutely told him, I will bear your child, Zachary. I read the will and understand that you were prepared to let me go. He had once said, I have remembered everything so that I can return what you brought to me, intact, which sounded like a cold Zachary, but it was also very thoughtful. But I couldn't help feeling miserable when I read that will. Was he always prepared to leave me? She clutched her husband's shoulders and said, I am no longer Bianca de Blanchefort, I am now the mistress of Arno and your wife, Bianca Arno. So don't give up on me anymore. Make me more ambitious. Hold me close, just for tonight. Zachary, heartbroken, looked at his wife but accepted her request and gently laid her on the bed. If it can ease any of your anxieties, then no matter how many times you want me to hold you, I will. I'll give you everything I have. Bianca grabbed his collar, pulled him down, and whispered against his lips, promise me, Zachary. I will never forgive you if you leave me. You must live and come back to me. Zachary smiled and kissed his wife tenderly as promised. That night, they ended with joy and satisfaction that nothing could compare to. Before dawn, the Arno territory was already bustling, gathering supplies to prepare for war. At this time, the Sevfranca army was like a lion retreating before the Aragon forces, so Zachary entrusted Gasper with the task of protecting Arno. Today, Bianca also came to see her husband off to war. She didn't forget to encourage Sover and Robert to return victorious. During this, Robert handed her a small sword, the one she used for swordsmanship training, and said, please forgive me for not being able to find a new one and leaving like this. But please, accept this. Bianca hesitated, if I take it, what will you use? Robert replied, I'll use Sover's sword. Sover agreed without hesitation. Robert continued, blushing, if anything happens to you and you don't have a sword in hand, I won't be able to forgive myself. Bianca understood and accepted it, thank you, Robert. At this moment, Zachary stepped towards her and brought out the lace handkerchief. Bianca, understanding his intention, tied it for her husband and whispered, may our army achieve a glorious victory. You haven't forgotten your promise to me, have you? Zachary hugged her and replied, of course not, I will definitely come back. She frowned and added, and don't forget your promise about the second prince either. At dawn, the Arno army marched eastward. Bianca suddenly wavered and collapsed. Despite her exhaustion, she persevered and ordered the steward to send letters to various places. I want to send one to my father, Count Blanchefort, and another to Archbishop Francis of the Grand Cathedral in Lajas, she commanded. Vincent was surprised, the Archbishop? Bianca added, no, make it 3 letters. Send the last one to Princess Odeli in Lajas. After reading the letter, Princess Odeli called her maid to pack everything for her return to the royal palace. The maid, a blonde, was surprised to see the princess so cheerful today, as she hadn't smiled so brightly since the death of the crown prince. There's been nothing to make me happy lately, but perhaps it's been a long time since I've received such a satisfying letter. A saint has comforted me, the princess replied. Meanwhile, Jacob was trying to console his sister-in-law after the crown prince's death. He held her hand, reassuring her that he wanted to become the guardian of young Prince Albert and be her strong support until the boy came of age. He put on a trustworthy face and claimed that Albert was his precious nephew. But all of Jacob's efforts were in vain when Odeli stepped in and announced that their father had agreed to let her become Prince Albert's guardian. Jacob's eyes widened in shock as he learned that the Blanchefort family would stand up to escort and protect Prince Albert and the crown princess. Odeli shot him a mocking glance and said, I hope the second prince doesn't need to worry too much about family matters. You should focus on the nation's crisis instead. Jacob's eyes widened with bitterness. He hadn't expected to be outmaneuvered by his arrogant sister. Watching the crown princess and her son safely escorted, Odeli sighed with relief, thinking, if I had been a bit slower, he would have acted first. Seeing the young prince, now fatherless, filled Odeli with a fierce anger. After reading the letter, she was in shock. He's a traitor to Aragon? Even as the second prince, how could he dare to betray our father like this? With these thoughts, Odeli clenched her fists, suppressing her rage. I have to make it clear to my second brother that, compared to anyone else in Laos, Odeli is the most troublesome and unpleasant one to deal with. In the room where a portrait of young Bianca hung, Jacob had learned that a letter had been sent from Arno to Princess Odeli and the Blanchefort family. Count Arno had also joined the battle. Confident, Jacob thought that even if Odeli became Albert's guardian, no nobles would be willing to participate in the war. Just by having the potential to inherit the throne, wouldn't the nobles be too afraid to help a count who has a bad relationship with me? As he toyed with Bianca's picture, an idea suddenly struck him. He ordered Viscount Wigo to send out a letter. Jacob gazed into the distance with a mocking smile. How long can you endure this war with an enemy within your own ranks, Count Arno? At the northern battlefield, the scouts had returned with shocking news. Aragon had a force of 5,000 soldiers. Despite Arno's maximum effort, they could only muster 3,000 soldiers. Moreover, Aragon was expecting reinforcements, which would increase their numbers even further. Though Zachary had sent a request for reinforcements to the royal family, no response had been received. Relying on the Blanchefort family for help was difficult as they were tasked with protecting Prince Albert. Zachary slammed his fist on the table decisively. We must endure. Let's hold out with all our might, reinforcements will surely come. At that moment, in the Arno camp, the sound of unfamiliar horses approaching was heard. It was a man clad entirely in iron armor, his face hidden. Immediately, a soldier ran up with good news. My lord, they've arrived. 1,000 reinforcements are here. Zachary was taken aback. No response, yet 1,000 reinforcements? Who are they? It's me, Count. The man stepped forward and greeted. When a tiger is cornered, even the arm of a rabbit can be useful. Zachary was astonished. Count d'Avaville? The man smiled broadly. Surprised, aren't you? After receiving your letter, I immediately prepared my troops, so I didn't have time to send a reply. Despite the reinforcements from the d'Avaville family, Zachary couldn't help but feel uneasy. The d'Avavilles had always supported the Crown Prince's faction, but ever since their son-in-law took over as heir, they had adopted a neutral stance. Why would he lead troops himself in such a situation? Marceau noticed Zachary's concern and spoke up. The d'Avaville family has been monitoring the saint ever since they first appeared. When I visited the Arno estate, you didn't seem aware of that. Sauveur and the others were puzzled. Why bring up the saint now? But Zachary understood Marc's point. Marceau had subtly inquired about the saint to learn the truth, showing his sharp mind and cunning nature, enough to make others wary. Zachary couldn't tell if Marceau truly wanted to ally with him or if he was just Jacob's pawn, sent to sow discord within their ranks. Is Marceau Garvine the poison of the second prince or an ally? Zachary gripped his sword tightly. There's only one way to find out. He shook Marc's hand and thanked him for the reinforcements, then asked to speak privately. Seeing Zachary dismiss his men, Marceau smiled knowingly. Outside the camp, Marceau spoke first. You must be wondering what I'm plotting, right? Zachary silently observed him. Apologies for causing you concern. I haven't mastered the refined manners of other nobles, Marceau said. Zachary responded candidly. Count d'Avaville, your wife and mine share a close bond, and you've even discussed the lace business with her. I don't want to beat around the bush. If the second prince sent you, then you should turn back now. Marceau was silent for a moment before responding. You've probably heard that I'm a son-in-law of the d'Avaville family, but what you might not know is that I'm an illegitimate child. Zachary was taken aback by this revelation. Marceau continued, the person who brought me into this world raised me according to their own needs, which is why I have a rather quick mind. He pointed to his head and added, without it, I might have ended up as a monk. Confidently, Marceau explained, when I was deducing that Lady Bianca might be a saint from the strange actions of the Grand Cathedral of Lajos, the person who birthed me sent me a letter. Since Archbishop Francis had identified the saint, it was only a matter of time before he became a cardinal. That person wanted me to get close to the Arno family to control the saint. After learning that my wife Catherine was close to Countess Arno, he sent me such a letter. I never considered accepting the request of someone who had used my life as a tool. And when I discussed business with Countess Arno, I realized she wasn't someone easily swayed. My reason for joining this battle has nothing to do with any hidden agenda. Remembering the moment he discarded his father's letter, Marceau noticed how deeply upset his wife had been. She lay across him, whispering, compared to Bianca, I haven't matured at all. Expecting someone to survive a battle unscathed is unreasonable. That's a heartless thing to say to a woman who has to send her husband off to war each time. I don't understand what Bianca goes through while waiting for her husband. I heard from the princess that only the Arno army is standing against Aragon. This battle will be very difficult. Catherine looked up at her husband with hopeful eyes. Is there no way we can help them, Marc? The adorableness of Catherine made her husband, who was infatuated with her, unable to hide his adoration. Suddenly, Marceau had an idea and responded, Catherine, if I say I will join the battle, can it help Countess Arno? Catherine's face turned dark, so this is how Bianca always feels. She swallowed hard and resolutely declared, the Davaville family is nobility in service to the royal family. We have a duty to serve the country and help it overcome this crisis. Marceau beamed, because my wife recognizes my honor and courage, because of Catherine, I joined the battle. Zachary was utterly stunned. He sighed and responded, you could have just sent reinforcements, why join the battle yourself? You are quite sincere with your wife. Well then, I'll count on your help, Count Davaville. The two husbands shook hands, sealing their alliance with a promise of mutual support. But immediately after, the ground suddenly shook unusually, and a rumbling sound from behind left the two men astonished. It was the army of Aragon. Upon learning that the Arno forces were isolated, the enemy had gathered and launched a surprise attack. A few months later, Arno territory had fully entered winter. Everyone, regardless of what they were doing, would warmly greet Lady Bianca as they passed by, to which she often replied, all right, everyone, carry on with your work. After returning from Lajas. Right after the Count went to the battlefield, the people in the territory moved to live in Arno Castle as per his orders. While her husband was away, Bianca actively managed everything in the castle. One example of her management was addressing the complaints of some people who found it inconvenient to work in the fields early in the morning due to the distance from the castle. As soon as Bianca heard their complaints, she went to the site to see for herself. Uncle, uncle! There's a lady here, a girl called out. The old man grumbled, what? Who's here? When the two of them saw Bianca, they were dumbfounded. They didn't recognize who she was and were so startled that they couldn't speak. Gaspar sternly said, show your respect. This is the Countess of Arno. Upon hearing this, both uncle and niece were shocked. The Countess, they exclaimed. The old man, trembling with fear, knelt down in a pitiful manner. Bianca then spoke up, was it you who said the fields were too far from the castle? The old man quickly replied, oh. No, ma'am, it wasn't me, but Bianca didn't pay attention to his denial. She ordered Gaspar to assign some guards to escort the workers to the fields. The situation in this war was very different from previous ones. The Count asked everyone to come to the castle because of this. I'll arrange for some guards with carriages to take you to the fields. It will be a bit inconvenient, but please try to manage for now. If there's any trouble, let the steward know. After giving her instructions, Bianca left, leaving the uncle and niece frightened and chastising each other for not recognizing the Countess. It's understandable since during the Feast of All Saints, they only saw the Count and Countess from afar and couldn't see their faces clearly. They only knew what the Countess looked like from rumors. The old man couldn't help but wonder, does the Countess walk around the castle every morning like this? Indeed, after the Count left, Arno became quite chaotic due to various matters. Usually, the steward would manage everything daily, but this time, the Countess was also involved. Vincent noticed Bianca seemed different and promptly asked her maid about her condition. Yes, milord. Madame hasn't been eating much, and even less so recently, the maid replied. Vincent felt concerned. If she continues overseeing the lace workshop and inspecting the territory like this, I fear she might faint. Madame has been out all day observing and assisting the villagers, so they no longer speak ill of her, the maid added. As weeks passed, Madame's reputation completely changed among the people. Madame, please have some of these. They are apples from our fields, a child offered. Bianca tousled the child's hair and thanked him for the gift. Seeing Madame tirelessly busy with work for weeks, Yvonne grew increasingly worried. The maid suggested Madame take a break today, but Bianca declined, saying, I'm fine, Yvonne. The child isn't tired and is working diligently. I must do the same. Yvonne replied, Madam, those children have been working since they could barely walk. You can't compare yourself to them. Under Yvonne's insistence, Bianca was led to a beautiful place. This is the snack storage for the children of Arno. When I was little, I used to pick wild strawberries with my sister from that tree over there. The wild strawberries bloom in the summer, and we would pick so many that our hands would turn red. Bianca felt a bit sad. Thinking back, I haven't really looked at the summer in Arno properly, have I? We've had so much time. Seeing her like that, Yvonne took her hand and comforted her. There will be plenty of wild strawberries next year too. When you ride with the Count, you must try them at least once. Bianca forced a smile and nodded in agreement to please her maid. The reason for her unease was the strange secrecy surrounding the war news. Pavo, who often brought news of the Count's victories, suddenly stopped coming to Arno. And not long after, an unexpected event happened to Bianca. Madam! A man ran towards her, breathless, holding an item in his hand. Bianca's eyes widened when she recognized the lace handkerchief she had tied to the count before he went to battle. It had drifted down the Arno River. At the Lajos Palace, while walking through the hall, a voice called out, "Odeli." Princess Odeli was surprised. "Lord Johann, what brings you here?" "Princess Odeli." The young boy Albert also arrived with Johann, holding a rather large gift box. Odeli gently asked, "Are you well? I thought you had already departed for the Blanchefort territory." Albert responded sadly, "I planned to say goodbye to His Majesty before leaving, but I've heard he hasn't woken up yet. This is a gift I made myself." Odeli took the gift and promised to deliver it to the Emperor for him. Watching Albert leave, Odeli thought to herself, the young prince is indeed a gentle child, but he is too weak to become emperor. Even if he is granted the right to the throne, can he stand against that cunning second prince? In the private chambers of the emperor, now awake, the king was very happy to see his daughter by his side. Despite years of being bedridden, he still worried about his army after the recent surprise attack. Odeli, with a strong demeanor, advised her father, "If you can regain your health, you should persuade the nobles to join the army." The king interrupted, "Odeli, do you also see me as indecisive?" Odeli only smiled gently. He continued, "I failed to choose a successor in time. It seems I will be ridiculed as a foolish king during this chaotic war, won't I?" The king reminisced about when his children were young. He had cherished Gosha and Odeli as treasures. However, when it came to Jacob, he was unsure of his feelings. Though he knew Jacob did not get along with his siblings, he let it be without intervening, only giving him the same opportunity as Gosha. Odeli comforted her father, "In this palace, everyone knows how much you cherished the second prince. Now, put aside your sympathy for him and focus on the people suffering from the war. There are girls becoming widows and children becoming orphans. With his loyalty, Count Arno has gone to battle in place of his king, while his wife waits for him every day." The emperor's eyes widened. He hadn't realized how much his daughter cared for the people. The princess held her father's hand tightly and said, "Because Odeli is your daughter too." As he turned over, the king noticed a small gift box, the one from the young Prince Albert. He was very happy to see the gift. "Oh, Albert," he exclaimed, turning to his daughter. "Can you show it to me?" A moment later, the emperor smiled with joy as his beloved daughter Odeli held the gift. "Odeli, you should keep this gift," he said warmly. When she left the room, Odeli immediately inquired about the second prince. However, according to the servants, he had not been in Lajos for several weeks. At the Arno estate, everyone was investigating whether the lace handkerchief truly belonged to the count. Although Bianca knew she hadn't made it herself, she couldn't help but fear the worst. One of the workers examined the handkerchief in detail and discovered something. "Madam, do you see the pattern here?" Mary marked it after she finished. "It is from the early production period, based on the designs you taught her. That's why it resembles the ones you made so closely." Bianca breathed a sigh of relief as if unburdened. "Gasper, what do you think?" Gasper pondered, "I think someone intentionally dropped this lace handkerchief. The flow of the Arno River goes opposite to the battlefield. It flows from Lajos here." Recalling Zachary's words from earlier, even the fastest horse takes 2 days, but those pedals only took half a day to reach Arno Castle. Bianca asked urgently, "So that means it couldn't possibly drift from the battlefield here?" She became suspicious, the secret of war news was odd, and now this lace handkerchief added to her doubts. It seemed someone wanted to send messages they wished to convey, and if that was someone's intention. Bianca's gaze suddenly turned dark. "Gasper, we need to travel to the source of the Arno River. I will go with you." Bianca led Gasper and a small search party against the objections of the steward and Yvonne, pushing upstream towards the source of the Arno River. When they reached a grove of birch trees where the river meandered, Bianca dismounted and continued on foot to search. There, she spotted a faint figure with a sinister smile. Bianca recognized him. "With your knowledge of her, I knew you would come," Jacob said with excitement, gazing at her happily. "I've missed you, Bianca." Bianca glanced around. Why was the second prince alone here? Seeing her concern, Jacob reassured her, "Don't worry, my retinue is just outside the forest. It's just the two of us here." He approached Bianca and remarked, "It's been a while since we last met. You've lost weight. I suppose you haven't been eating well? Well, your husband has been ordered to the battlefield where our allies dare not venture." Bianca's eyes widened in shock. "No allied troops? The Order of the Holy Knights didn't come to aid Zachary? Then why hasn't the letter I sent to Archbishop Francis reached him?" Jacob continued to taunt, "Looking at your expression, I sense your genuine concern for Count Zachary." Bianca, angered, retorted, "Then why the person Q on that news is here? If my husband is the only noble participating in the battlefield to save Sevfranca, then you, a member of the royal family, should lead the army against the invading forces, shouldn't you? Jacob looked at Bianca's expression with immense satisfaction. Other women, when I engage them in conversation, would be ashamed and unable to look me in the eye, but you are different from them. You've always looked straight at me like this. No one else, I just want those eyes to belong to me alone. Can I achieve that? He asked eagerly. Bianca replied disdainfully, I didn't come here to listen to your flattery. Why did you summon me here? She held up the lace handkerchief. I know this isn't my husband's. With war raging, what's the purpose of this selfish drama you're staging? Jacob grinned, no longer hiding anything as he recounted, when the war broke out, I blocked all communications in and out of Arno. Because if you knew the truth, it would cause you great pain. I think you need to prepare yourself. Because in the future, you will live and die holding on to Zachary Arno, the man who is already dead, in those eyes of yours. The cold wind swept through Bianca, sending shivers down her spine. Who are you talking about? She asked, trembling. Jacob adjusted his iron cap and spoke coldly, Count Zachary Arno has fallen in battle. His head was brought back from Aragon, and they found only this iron cap among the corpses. His death will surely shock everyone, especially the emperor and the people. So, I blocked information through my channels. Bianca collapsed to the cold ground, Isabel the horse trying to comfort her but unable to ease Bianca's crisis. Zachary is dead? Isn't his existence what the spirits desired? Isn't that why I am a saint? If I could love Zachary, I would try my best to save him. Why is everything just like the previous life? She lamented. Jacob approached and placed the iron cap on the ground, reminding her that without a lord in Arno, greed would surely consume the land, especially from Zachary's older brother, Earl Wigu. Arno had become wealthy from lace sales, making it a coveted territory. I won't let that person covet your land, even if it's my closest confidant, he concluded firmly. Jacob gently held her shoulders and reassured, I will protect you from such people. Think about it, now that my older brother Gosha is gone, who else is closer to the throne than me? If Lajos becomes an ally of Arno, wouldn't it be better for the people there? So choose me, Bianca. Seeing Bianca trembling, Jacob moved closer and spoke softly, It's okay, Bianca. You can cry if you want. The soul of Count Zachary Arno will find comfort in those tears. Bianca responded, opening up, I thought so too, but your words seem to be cooling down my heated thoughts. Jacob widened his eyes, asking, What do you mean? Bianca continued firmly, If I wail and faint, will it bring joy to my husband's soul? Are you imagining that, Prince Jacob? I know everything already. Jacob, still holding her tightly, responded calmly amidst Bianca's emotional outburst, It's because of your husband's death that your spirit is unsettled, isn't it? Conspiring with Aragon? You're imagining things a bit too much. Despite Bianca's struggle to wrench her arm free, Jacob continued to restrain her gently. We've never had an honest conversation, have we? You've only used me to provoke your husband, haven't you? You see me only as a tool. Zachary never knew how to comfort me when I cried. You said his soul was comforted by my tears. You don't understand us at all. That's why you're talking nonsense. Bianca, still in Jacob's grasp, retorted with a calm yet cutting tone, You're truly pitiful. Faced with a woman who hates you enough to point a sword at herself, yet you still embrace her and continue to flirt. Aren't you pathetic? Jacob, visibly angered by her words of scorn, clenched his jaw and forcefully grabbed her long hair, his voice sharp with fury, The son of an abandoned woman, even when I reclaim my position in the royal family, that stigma continues to haunt me relentlessly. So I must use everything available to survive. But when I plead with you like this, don't you think it could be genuine love? Bianca gritted her teeth and replied, Fine, do as you wish. But I won't owe you anything. So if you want me, just take this body. With that, she took her sword from his side and cut off her long hair, shocking Jacob with her unconventional departure method. Jacob was taken aback by her actions. His heart suddenly felt heavy and constricted as he watched the woman he loved leave without hesitation. Unable to contain his anger and frustration, he shouted, Why? Why must you reject me like this? Suddenly, an arrow whizzed through the air and struck the ground in front of Jacob. It was Gaspar who had shot it. Gaspar drew his sword and warned Jacob to stay away from Lady Bianca Arno. Jacob, infuriated by the challenge to his authority as a prince, hesitated momentarily. Seeing the tense situation unfold, Bianca urged her guards to quickly return. She retrieved her husband's helmet and stepped away from Jacob. Jacob, still trying to hold on, pleaded, I'll give you time to think. His expression softened with sadness, Bianca, Arno is left without a ruler now. Bianca, unwilling to hear more, left with Gaspar from the scene. On the way back to her domain, Bianca couldn't contain herself and urged her horse, Isabel, to run faster. Lady! Slow down, Isabel might stumble. Lady! Lady! Listen to me! Gasper shouted desperately, but in her confused state, Bianca collapsed into another realm, where the sky was vast and endless fields of flowers stretched out. There, Sover and Robert awaited her. Robert gently inquired about her current life. Bianca couldn't hold back her tears. If both Sover and Robert are here, it means they are no longer in this world. Robert gestured ahead. Under a tree, Zachary stood waiting for her. Bianca abandoned her helmet and rushed towards Zachary. But his arm raised, halting her. In bidding farewell, I must ask for your forgiveness. When you said, if I die and leave you alone, you will never forgive me, if those words still hold true, then let me stay here and you can return. Bianca rushed forward and embraced him tightly. She whispered gently, I want to go with you, I'm so tired. I just want to follow you now. Zachary remained silent for a moment, then gently released her and comforted, if that's what you want, you can do so anytime. He wiped away her tears and continued, but I wonder if you can fulfill the wish of such a terrible man? Sensing something, Bianca shook her head, refusing what he was about to say, you must live, Bianca. She couldn't hold back anymore and burst into tears in front of her husband. Under the enchanting purple tree, Zachary conveyed to her, protect Arn, even if I die, Arn is still our territory. You must safeguard it in my place. He held her hand and placed it on her belly, and our child too, Bianca. Bianca's eyes widened, recalling moments of dizziness and recent headaches. Despite her loss of appetite, she still craved crisp red apples and admired the children's candy store in Arno. Deep within, a serene longing stirred within her. Bianca turned to look at her husband, seeing his profoundly happy expression. Do you know, Zachary, that Arno has vast plains? So even if I walk for miles, I won't get tired. I learned to ride a horse so fast thanks to this flat land. Yvonne told me that in Arno, wild strawberries grow abundantly in early summer, which I can pick to eat and play in the summer fields of blooming flowers everywhere. If I must protect this beautiful land, which will become our child's homeland, I will do as you wish. Zachary held her close and spoke his final words, I really want to experience all 4 seasons of Arno with you and our child, Bianca. As their lips met, Zachary transformed into petals of blooming flowers, gently drifting away with the breeze. Farewell, beloved husband, Zachary. Farewell, my love. The serene dream ended there, and Bianca finally woke up, greeted warmly by Yvonne. It turned out Bianca hadn't fallen from Isabel, as the horse had slowed down upon Gasper's command. Upon returning to the castle, the knight escorted her back to the recovery room. I trimmed the lady's hair while you was asleep. And just now, the doctor arrived to examine you, Yvonne started to say, but Bianca interrupted, tears streaming down her face as she held her belly, I know. Yvonne sobbed and clasped her mistress's hand, congratulations on being pregnant, madam. There was no time to mourn her husband's death. Now, Bianca and the people of the territory had to contend with a powerful force aiming for Arno. Do you really want to conquer Arno? We have no reason to do that, Prince Jacob, Bianca questioned. Jacob replied sharply, the Countess of Arno threatened me with a sword, Arno's guards aimed arrows at me. Are those reasons not persuasive enough, Count Oslo? That's a challenge to the authority of the Sefranka royal family and an act of rebellion. Our army has 5,000 men, while Arno has only 500. They won't be able to withstand for long. No matter what, we must conquer them before Zachary realizes everything and returns to his territory. Zachary scanned the battlefield, searching for something. Meanwhile, a young boy was busy clearing corpses, his face strained under the weight of that man's grim task. Seeing such a young child involved in such a gruesome job, Zachary couldn't hide his sorrow. It was also strange to witness how the Aragon forces would attack and then withdraw without even taking the time to collect their fallen. Fortunately, the Sefranka army had managed this issue to prevent the spread of disease, though it left the farmers worrying about tax obligations. If they were to perish due to illness, who would be left to pay taxes? Zachary listened quietly, pondering the situation. The boy, noting Zachary's demeanor, assumed he was a hunter and pointed out areas with plentiful deer for hunting. He expressed surprise at Zachary's arrival from the nearby mountain. Curious, the boy asked, but sir, why would you come down to such a chaotic and dangerous place like this? Zachary, not accustomed to lying, scratched his head hesitantly and replied, I've lost something nearby. Both the boy and the nearby man found Zachary's answer peculiar. Continuing his search, Zachary couldn't find his belongings, only those of others who had perished alongside him. Even Lajos doesn't know how the war is unfolding. This remark caught Zachary's attention, prompting him to inquire further. It turned out that the communication station had been overrun, leaving everyone uncertain about the accurate state of the war. With no clear information on who was winning, the nobles were hesitant to send troops without proper guidance. They also wondered why the second prince wasn't on the battlefield himself, leaving the populace to suffer like this. Zachary remained silent, absorbing all that had been said. As night fell, only the cold wind embraced the battlefield. Near the camp of Arno's army, enemy scouts silently observed their movements. Unnoticed, a sword blade pressed against one scout's throat, and someone escorted him silently to meet his fate. Zachary muttered, "Indeed, one can catch a deer like this." He then carried the scout back into the camp. Both Robert and Sover were safe, and they asked, "Have you found what you were looking for, my lord?" Zachary replied, "I couldn't find the helmet, but I found this scout instead." It's strange that only the helmet went missing in all that chaos. Recalling the battle, Zachary remembered a hand grabbing his helmet and pulling it away, despite him severing the arm that did so, yet failing to recover the helmet and injuring his eye in the process. Aragon's actions were also peculiar, attacking and then withdrawing their forces. There was no response from Arno's fortress either. It seemed the information blackout was indeed true, likely orchestrated by the second prince as a ploy. Suddenly, a book was thrust towards them, and another man's voice spoke up, "Seems like the second prince wants to tie down Count Zachary here." Mac speculated, "After hearing what you said about the second prince being a spy for Aragon, this move makes sense. Even if Sevfranca's army is wiped out, he wouldn't care. And the Count, commanding Sevfranca's forces, can't leave this position. If Aragon can get hold of your helmet, second prince could use it to fabricate misinformation, like, Count has fallen, for example." Mac smirked. Count Zachary of Arno might find himself in trouble. Zachary furrowed his brow, contemplating silently. He touched the ring on his finger and asked Count d'Aveville, "If it were you, what would you choose to do?" Mac replied immediately, "I'd abandon everything and run back to my beloved wife Catherine. Wouldn't you think the same? The nation's collapse isn't my concern. I only care about the safety of d'Aveville and my wife." Knowing Zachary wouldn't act that way, Mac continued, "Even if you love your wife like I do, you can't abandon Sevfranca, can you?" Zachary remained silent for a moment before responding, "You think highly of me, Count d'Aveville." He tightened his grip on his hand, his expression grim. "To be honest, even if it's just me alone, I want to abandon everything and return to Arno immediately." Zachary had figured everything out but couldn't leave his army to return to his wife, which made him increasingly anxious. Inevitably, the situation escalated. "Listen here, Countess of Arno, Gasper, and the knights. You have been accused of attempting to assassinate the second prince. Inside the castle, Bianca was already waiting for that man. You have arrived, second prince?" The siege of the castle was a defensive battle when the territory was attacked by invaders. Before going to battle, the count had instructed to bring all the people outside the castle walls into the castle. Here, the northern granary would be open to meet the people's food needs. Although it was winter and the weather was dry, the moats had been filled with water to prepare Arno for the castle attack. In reality, a siege benefits those who can endure. Therefore, the count had planned for Arno to withstand until he could return. That day, when the townspeople of Arno saw their countess return in a fainting state with her hair in disarray and cut short, they couldn't help but gossip. For a noblewoman, her long hair was as important as her life. So, who on earth had done this to the countess's hair? In the countess's room, a physician had come to examine her and gave Yvonne a few instructions before leaving. As soon as he stepped outside the mansion, a group of people swarmed him with questions. "Are you the doctor?" Seeing their hostile expressions, he was startled. "How is the countess? Has she regained consciousness? Did she fall from her horse? Besides her hair, is she injured anywhere else?" The physician was bombarded with questions and almost dropped his glasses. After explaining the situation, the townspeople learned that there were those coming to seize the Arno territory. They also discovered that the second prince had harassed the countess, driving her to wield a sword and fight for her life. To escape the prince's clutches, she had to cut off her own hair. Everyone in the territory shared a common feeling of outrage towards the second prince. Outside the castle, the royal army was still besieging Arno, demanding that someone be handed over. Seeing that these people were stubbornly digging in, Bianca told the steward, "Gather all the townspeople in the courtyard immediately." She then made an important announcement. "At this moment, everyone will think Arno has rebelled against the second prince and become traitors. Even if we endure this battle, Arno's future will be destroyed if the Sevfranca royal family sides with the second prince. Therefore, anyone who wants to leave this territory should do so now." The crowd buzzed with discussion. Bianca continued, "If you walk for about 10 days along the forest road to the east, you will reach the land of my kin, Blanchenfort. I have ordered the steward to write letters of introduction. If you carry them, you will surely be. A man interrupted loudly, Lady, speak more reasonably. Do you think we will abandon our ancestral land so easily? We will not act like the nobles of the past. Bianca was stunned. It seems the lady doesn't understand us at all. We were born and raised here, have nurtured our children here, and so it goes from generation to generation. If we can protect this land, even if it means becoming traders, we are willing. Yes. That's right. Arno is our homeland. This pride doesn't belong only to the nobility, we will defend this territory with you, my lady. Bianca bit her lip and cried out, but Arno no longer has a master strong enough to protect everyone. Zachary has. Mentioning the count, everyone looked at each other, and Bianca shed painful tears. A woman spoke up, my lady, no matter who comes here, there will be no lord as strong and excellent as Count Zachary. But now we have a mistress, who, though she may not have his strength, does not run away and chooses to protect this land. It is you, my lady, and that is something we are proud of. Bianca, hearing the support of the townspeople, was moved to tears. She had not expected such profound affection from them. Everyone gathered around her, comforting and encouraging her to overcome this adversity together. Outside the castle, Viscount Wigu continued to loudly demand the surrender of the people they sought. However, Jacob instructed him to stop and to slowly return and wait. Suddenly, Bianca stepped up and stood proudly on top of the castle wall. Jacob, upon seeing her, called out her name, Bianca. She stood silently, looking down at them. He thought she would kneel and open the gates to surrender, but instead, Bianca raised her middle finger high, insulting them. The second prince's men stared at her in shock and began cursing. Arno will resist your army, just wait and see. Seeing the woman he loved make such a rude gesture at him, Jacob stood there, stunned. The steward and Yvonne were extremely shocked, and Vincent fainted, unable to comprehend how his noble mistress had learned such vulgar behavior. Little did he know she had picked it up during her past life as a street urchin. Viscount Wigu was furious. Did you all see that? That crazy woman dared to insult the second prince like that. But he fell silent when the second prince suddenly laughed loudly and said with great amusement, let's go back, Viscount Wigu. The more something slips through my fingers, the more I want to have it. I wonder if she knows that, Bianca? At the Davaville residence in Lajos, a distinguished guest had come to visit. It was none other than Her Highness, Princess Odeli. In the garden, Odeli inquired about the health of her friend. Catherine responded, I'm all right, Your Highness. When my husband went to war, I stubbornly told him not to leave me alone. And he said, if I have to leave my lovely wife alone in this land, my heart will be very uneasy, so I cannot go to war. Odelle, sitting beside her, couldn't help but praise her friend's husband. He's truly a role model for all men in Sefranca to follow. However, she noticed that Catherine's calm demeanor was unusual for a noblewoman who had no news about her husband's participation in the war. At this point, Catherine finally spoke the truth. The reason she hadn't visited the princess and instead invited her to Lajos was that Marceau had said there were too many eyes and ears in Lajos. Odeli paused for a moment when she saw her friend produce a letter exchanged between her and her husband. Through the priest, she asked. Catherine replied, yes, that's correct. To be precise, I only receive letters. Sending letters could be dangerous, so this is how Marceau lets me know he's safe. He also mentioned that the Sefranca army is still holding strong. But the letter sent yesterday had an unusual line. He asked if the lace-making was still going well. Odeli murmured, and then? Catherine shook her head, not knowing. She only knew that Marceau had discussed lace production with Bianca before he went to war. She frowned and thought, in such a difficult situation, why would he suddenly write about lace production? Odeli seemed to grasp the underlying message. Marceau must mean that something has happened in Arno. The absence of the second prince from Lajos for several weeks, along with the message from Count Davaville, made her even more certain. Suddenly, Odeli turned to ask about the maid's father, Viscount Bolne. An idea sparked in the princess's mind. Very well, I'll grant you a vacation. How do you feel about visiting your father after a long time? The maid, with her blonde hair, felt confused, but Odeli only hinted that traveling to Bolne's territory would mean passing through Blanchefort, and thus through Arno as well. On the northern battlefield, Marceau was asking a priest to send a letter home. Seeing Zachary inquire about using priests for sending letters, Marceau didn't hesitate to explain, the priests in the capital know that sharing poverty and humility is a virtue. They provide shelter for pilgrims, and in return, I donate labor. Instead of receiving labor or shelter, I get information. In the end, neither side loses. I get the information, and they make some money. Zachary praised Marceau's quick thinking, but Marceau regarded the Count as even more impressive. As they were deep in conversation, a group of horses galloped toward them. Sauver had successfully captured the supply depot of Aragon in the west. All of Aragon's warhorses and provisions were seized, severely diminishing their morale. Now, Zachary was eager to return to Arno, suspecting that the second prince was there causing trouble, as the prey he most desired was Zachary's wife, Bianca. Thinking about this, Zachary's face contorted with anger. He ordered Sauver to relay his commands to each unit. Tomorrow morning, we will launch a full-scale attack. A week had passed since the siege on Arno had begun. The Count's fortress remained steadfast in its defense against the relentless assaults from the royal army. Despite hearing rumors of the Count's death, the people inside the fortress continued to valiantly hold their ground. Viscount Wigu couldn't understand how the people of Arno managed to maintain their morale after hearing that their lord had perished. However, Jacob wasn't bothered by this. He had devised a sinister plan to deal with the common folk. In a surreal scene, a deity with angelic wings presented Bianca with a silver sword. The deity was so beautiful that Bianca couldn't help but gaze at them for a long moment before slowly accepting the sharp silver sword. But as everything became clearer, Bianca realized she was sitting in her room, with the usual morning sounds of birds chirping outside. So it was just a dream, she murmured to herself. As soon as the sun began to rise, the people of Arno were already up and bustling about their daily tasks. Bianca, too, climbed up to the city walls to check on the guards. Everything seemed to be under control, though a few of the enemy had tried to cross the moat. The guards had quickly dealt with those pests. Bianca encouraged everyone to stay healthy and maintain their fighting spirit. Seeing the soldiers bravely fighting the enemy while enduring the cold and hunger of winter made her heart ache. Ivan came to comfort her, saying, "They have chosen you as their protector and successor, my lady. Look at their faces, they are not the faces of those who are suffering. People who have something to protect often have incredible resilience, my lady." Bianca smiled peacefully, but almost immediately, a loud cry rang out, "Fire! Fire! There's a fire in the north warehouse!" Some soldiers on the fortress quickly descended to extinguish the flames as ordered. Bianca, alarmed, hurried to the warehouse. The north side? The fire was raging fiercely. People were desperately trying to salvage whatever supplies they could to prevent them from turning to ashes. Gasper was assisting them when he saw Bianca running over. "Is anyone hurt, Gasper?" she asked. "No, my lady, but the goods in the warehouse." Ivan anxiously checked if Gasper was injured, while Bianca stood, staring at the large flames before her. She silently took in the situation, then coldly spoke, "Gasper, there's the smell of burning oil in the air. If this isn't an accidental fire, then someone definitely set it. Find everyone outside the castle. No one should leave once we order a lockdown. We must find the culprit." Eventually, a textile merchant who had arrived in Arno before the gates closed became the main suspect. He persistently pleaded his innocence, begging for mercy, claiming he had entered Arno as he always did. But Vincent was certain it was a face he had never seen before, and even Ivan, who had met all the textile merchants, had never encountered him. Bianca sternly looked at him. "Arno already has many textile workers, so someone like you coming here to do business would be quite unprofitable." Upon being discovered, he immediately started trembling. Bianca glared at him. "Why did you enter my territory?" Immediately, his cart was brought over on Bianca's order. It was filled with barrels of oil and cheap fabric, and even more surprisingly. A man, utterly horrified, stumbled and fell backward. Bianca and Ivan were equally shocked as hundreds of rats in a steel cage scurried around, frantically seeking an escape. "They're so disgusting, squeaking and wriggling all over." Bianca shouted, "Rats? Why would a merchant carry a horde of rats?" The suspect remained silent, trembling with fear. Bianca seemed to have figured it all out. "That man ordered you to burn down my castle and release the rats. That man is Jacob, isn't it? Rats are carriers of infectious diseases that spread easily. Years ago, her nanny Ran had died from a disease carried by rats. That man wanted the warehouse to burn to create chaos inside the castle, and he planned to use the rats to spread disease among the townspeople. If one person gets infected, it will spread to others, from the elderly to children. He intended to massacre all the citizens?" The thought of it made Bianca unable to contain her rage. She ordered Gasper to thoroughly deal with the rats to prevent any outbreak of disease. As for the merchant, she wanted him gone from the castle. Bianca hugged her trembling body and silently vowed, "No matter what despicable schemes he devises, I won't let him succeed." Outside the castle, Jacob saw the plume of smoke rising within the castle grounds. He smiled wickedly and thought to himself, "I plan to use Aragon to seize the throne of Sevfranca. I will obtain it, even if it means slaughtering innocent people. Back at the Arno estate, Bianca watched the steward and Yvonne inventorying the remaining goods after the fire. She couldn't help but worry about Arno's fate, especially since she couldn't seek help from the Blanchefort family, who were currently protecting Prince Albert. Archbishop Francis had not responded, and the princess didn't have an army to offer support. Bianca felt utterly helpless. Fiddling with her wedding ring and kissing it, she whispered, "What should I do in times like these, Zachary?" As Bianca sank deeper into despair, she remembered Jacob's words, "Choose me, Bianca." A sudden thought crossed her mind: should I offer myself to him and negotiate? Should I beg him to withdraw his troops to save my people and then safely give birth to this child, joining Zachary in the afterlife? But she quickly dismissed that foolish thought. No. I can't leave my child alone in this world. My child will grow up without a father, so I must raise and cherish them, give them all the love and ensure they lack nothing. I'll sell lace my entire life to earn money and live lavishly so no one can look down on me. As she lamented her fate, there was a knock at the door. Bianca wiped away her tears and called for the person to enter. It was young Nicola, who said, "I came to personally deliver candles for you, my lady." Bianca took the large box from the boy. Nicola, being very sensitive, wanted to help clean the burned warehouse, despite being punished by Bianca earlier. He apologized for disobeying her orders due to his selfish wish. Bianca comforted and forgave him, opening the box. But as soon as she saw its contents, she was shocked. It was a carving of a deity holding a long, sharp sword, identical to the one she had seen in her dream last night. She quickly closed the box with a loud snap, startling Nicola. The boy, seeing her distressed expression, nervously asked, "My lady, what's wrong? Is there a problem?" Bianca murmured, "The image of a deity holding a sword, just like the one in my dream. What does this mean?" She swallowed hard and asked Vincent, "How many wax candles do we have left?" Vincent replied, "Besides the ones you use, we still have quite a few, my lady." Bianca continued, "From now on, assign candles for Nicola to carve all around the town." Nicola, looking at the candle you made, a story came to mind. In a monastery in another country, to ward off invaders with the power of faith, they spent much time and money creating a holy Bible. This was during a prolonged war, yet sometimes it provided strength to the people. It might seem useless, but thanks to your candles, we got help from Lajos and had the chance to meet Archbishop Francis. I don't know if he'll send the Holy Knights to Zachary, but now I feel Arno needs your artistic work once again. So, don't stop, keep carving those beautiful candles for me. This is something only you can do. I'm counting on you. Do it for the people of Arno who are weary of war. In the grand shrine of Arno territory, people prayed silently under the candlelight depicting the holy deities. Amazing! Did that boy make this? If I didn't see the flame, I would have mistaken it for a marble sculpture, someone whispered in awe. Suddenly, someone gestured for silence nearby. People are praying. The two murmured apologies and joined the congregation, praying for peace as the candle burned. At the guard post, Nicola's candles were also placed. Bianca sat in her room, staring at a carved candle. If saving Zachary and killing Jacob is not my mission, then it means I still have something to do, right? Why someone as incapable as me? If I hadn't returned to the past, no one in Arno would have to endure this suffering, and Zachary wouldn't have to die twice. You must take responsibility. You saved me, someone without any skills, so I must try. All the innocent people chose me, so you must save me too, no matter what. At the Arno army camp, Zachary stood outside in the falling snow, looking into the distance. Inside, his three close confidants were still worried about the impending full-scale attack against the Aragon forces. Marceau wanted to carefully consider the timing of their attack. Despite having seized their supplies and warhorses, their own soldiers were still vastly outnumbered. Robert had a different view, but if we delay, they might call for reinforcements. Our troops are exhausted from the prolonged fighting. If we aren't lucky, we could be defeated. Sauver agreed with his master. Besides, I want to return quickly to rescue Lady Bianca. He bit his lip anxiously. It's exhausting seeing the Count so angry every day. I never know when he'll explode, and it's incredibly unsettling. And he must be furious to the point of unbuttoning his collar in this freezing weather. Hearing this, Robert could only hold his head and shake it. I wish an army would fall from the sky. Unbeknownst to them, that seemingly idle wish was about to come true. Zachary heard a strange noise from afar. This is the Sevfranca military camp. Who are you to enter so freely? The figure continued to approach. You must be Count Zachary Arno. Despite the late hour, I had to come and greet you in person. A woman's voice rang out clearly. I am Andrew, captain of the Holy Knights. Robert and the others peered out curiously. Responding to the call for aid from Saint Bianca, the Holy Knights are here to follow the commands of Zachary Arnaud, the supreme commander of the Sevfranca army. Sauver's mouth dropped open. What? Saint Bianca? 3,000 soldiers from the Holy Knights are here, all under your command, Andrew said, kneeling respectfully. Please give us your orders, Count Zachary Arnaud. At the Aragon army camp. Meanwhile, 2 soldiers on night watch noticed the unusual wind and noise outside. There's a lot of snow, but the wind isn't usually this strong. What could that noise be? A blizzard? From a distance, they heard a rumbling that felt like an earthquake. Suddenly, a horse galloped up to them. Enemy forces. Sevfranca has broken through. The sudden attack from the Sevfranca army threw the Aragon soldiers into chaos. Sevfranca's army? But they're wearing armor with wings? How many of them are there? Just the sound of their hooves must be over 10,000. Where on earth did they find such a massive force? At the same time, the Arnaud forces charged in. The Arnaud army joined the fray with a thunderous roar. The Holy Knights, distinguished by their massive wings, created a sound akin to 10,000 soldiers charging across the ground when galloping on horseback. This overwhelming force instilled a fear that spread faster than any disease, rapidly diminishing the enemy's morale. From a high vantage point, Zachary and Andrew watched the battlefield. Andrew recounted, after Saint Bianca requested the Holy Knights to be sent to the battlefield, I was ready to lead the army immediately. However, there was significant opposition to the Holy See's intervention in the conflict between nations. Archbishop Francis had to convince them that the failure and death of Count Arnaud were the worst possible future Saint Bianca foresaw. Do people not understand what that means? God's will is for Sevfranca's victory. Andrew beamed, adding, since then, the Holy See had no reason to refuse. Both Robert and Sauver were stunned to learn that their Lady Bianca was a saint, a figure appearing only once in several centuries. Seeing their expressions, Andrew chuckled, you had a saint right in front of you and didn't realize? Robert turned to the Count, did you know about this? Zachary simply smiled, confirming the revelation. Screech! It's the Black Wolf banner. It's Count Zachary. After the full-scale attack on the enemy base, everything was swept clean by morning. If not for Bianca, these corpses would have been our Arnaud soldiers, Zachary said, looking towards the sun with a grateful heart. Thank you, Bianca. Today's victory is all thanks to you. Meanwhile, back in Arnaud, Bianca felt as though she could hear Zachary calling her. Yvonne approached, draping a cloak over her mistress and urging, you must take care of your health. You only ate half an apple this morning because of morning sickness. Please, go and rest. Bianca replied, but sour foods are so tempting. Yvonne exclaimed, they say if a pregnant woman eats a lot of sour foods, the child will be very lively. In the midst of their conversation, a whistling sound filled the air. The 2 women turned pale as a large boulder hurtled towards them. With a tremendous crash, a section of the city wall collapsed. Bianca managed to shield her maid. When Yvonne opened her eyes and called out, my lady, she saw a stream of red blood dripping onto her hand. Bianca's face was streaked with blood. Yvonne's eyes widened in shock as she realized that the one who bore the brunt of the stone shower was her fiancé, Gaspa. Amidst the villagers' screams below, the large stones continued to fall. The second prince's army was using catapults to attack the sturdy wall. The wall had now become a chaotic mess. Yvonne, seeing the blood on Gaspa's head, panicked and cried out, Sir Gaspa, blood. Before she could finish her sentence, Gaspa wrapped his arms around the 2 women and shouted, stay alert and run. Another barrage of stones followed. Using his large body, Gaspa shielded both Bianca and Yvonne. Yvonne's eyes grew wild as she watched the man she loved risk his life to protect them. Gaspa, breathing heavily, assessed the situation, they're reloading the stones. You both need to escape now. Bianca nodded in agreement. She grabbed Yvonne, who was reluctant to leave her fiancé. As the 2 women moved away, another round of stones rained down. They were horrified to see a body crushed by the stones right behind them. Everyone, get inside. Hurry, hurry. The entire fortress struggled to withstand the enemy's relentless attacks. The 2 girls, trembling, found refuge in a place that could be called safe. Bianca could only suppress the boiling anger within her. After a while, the Arnaud fortress grew quiet. It seemed the enemy had withdrawn from their assault. Seeing Gaspa safe and sound, Yvonne rushed to him with tears streaming down her face. They embraced tightly, their hearts relieved of the tearing anxiety. Witnessing the aftermath of the stone barrage, and the lifeless bodies scattered around, Bianca felt immense sorrow. My lady, the steward's voice rang out. He was panting and trembling as he asked, Are you all right, my lady? Bianca kindly inquired, Are you okay, steward? Vincent replied, I was at the scene of the fire the whole time. No stones flew there, so no one was hurt. Hearing this, Bianca sighed with relief. My lady, your face looks so pale. Bianca retorted, your face looks as white as a sheet of paper. The old steward exclaimed, you should go inside the manor to rest. Soon after, a cup of hot milk was brought to her. Because Bianca was suffering from morning sickness and couldn't eat much, this seemed good for her. She sniffed it for a while, and realizing she could drink it, she took it and thanked Vincent. The steward couldn't help but worry because, after the fire, there wasn't much food left in the territory. As Bianca took a sip of milk, she teased, Vincy, I used to tease you and call you that, didn't I? Vincent smiled warmly and then suddenly asked, have you heard about the Count leaving Viscount Wigu's house? Seeing Bianca shake her head, Vincent slowly recounted. About 14 to 15 years ago, when he was bedridden and near death, the previous lord asked me to take good care of his 2 sons. He was worried about their future. He said, even though people say Roland lacks virtue, if he inherits the title, naturally, there will be people who side with him. The one I am most concerned about is Zachary. If anything happens, you must step forward and stand by Zachary. I rely on you for this. Vincent looked at the belongings of the young master that had been thrown out, his heart heavy. He quietly gathered them up. Right after the Viscount's death, he left that place with the Count, carrying the hope and responsibility entrusted to him by the former lord. Vincent reminisced, for many years, we lived off what he hunted. But since it wasn't enough, he had to find work. One day, he returned with a strange man. It turned out he had taken a job as a bodyguard. Later, there were people who needed someone to deal with bandits, so he became a mercenary. I'm off, steward, he said to me. That's how he ended up joining the army of Crown Prince Gautier, and his name became known to everyone. Steward Vincent couldn't help but be surprised to see the young man had grown so much, and Zachary always kept his promise to him that he would return alive, for Vincent was the only family he had left. After some time, Zachary found good friends on the battlefield. He was granted a title and given a territory. Then, he received offers that were hard to refuse. A bride with such a large dowry? Vincent was astonished. How can we meet all her demands? We must strive harder with 400 calves, 900 pigs, 100 silver bowls, 300 bolts of silk, 2 treasure chests, and an estate. It was equivalent to the revenue of one of the 2 years at that time, and it was a marriage that brought benefits that were hard to turn down. One day in the hall of Arno Manor, there was a sound of a door opening somewhere. Young Bianca looked around, searching for her nanny, so she ran around the mansion to find her. Suddenly, she hesitated and widened her eyes as she faced a dark corridor ahead, which looked very frightening. Despite her fear, Bianca swallowed hard and carefully clung to the railing to descend. As she moved through the hall, Vincent heard a commotion of servants. He stood there looking very puzzled. What is everyone gathering here for? Oh, Mr. Steward, he suddenly startled, seeing the scene before his eyes. Madam? He exclaimed in horror as he saw Lady Bianca collapse onto the floor. While everyone whispered to themselves, should they lift the lady up or not, young Bianca only blushed. Then suddenly she got up, making everyone startled. They hesitated to watch her shadow leave. It wasn't that they didn't want to help her up, but the embarrassment of their young lady made them hesitate. And for her, the change in the environment was also not easy. Since then, the lady didn't want to leave her room anymore. I can't believe it, I heard the lady fell down, but no one helped her up, they just watched. I want you to replace all the servants here, get some intelligent people who can properly serve the lady. Bianca's nanny seized this opportunity to both shame the lowliness of a nobleman and demand more luxuries for Bianca. Vincent, despite feeling extremely disgusted, reluctantly endured. When the nanny left, he hinted at using Bianca's dowry to meet her demands. However, the Grand Prince disagreed, saying, we can't send Bianca home empty-handed. Vincent broke out in a cold sweat, asking, what do you mean, my lord? Zachary replied indifferently, isn't Arno able to sustain itself without relying on the dowry? My concern is, what if I die on the battlefield? Vincent listened, his expression darkening and his eyes widening. Why couldn't he have fought more fiercely for young Master Roland before leaving the Wigu household, and why was he unable to stay away from the battlefield? Since being expelled from the house, and especially with the complications surrounding the marriage to a child, there was no heir. Even drafting a will and arranging everything for the lady were things he failed to protect from the start. Mrs. Jan, Bianca's nanny, had persistently resisted the Grand Prince Blanchefort when he decided on a marriage partner for Bianca. Even on the wedding day, she appeared difficult and proud on the surface, but inside, she knew how to voice her opinions to protect the lady. At that time, I was old enough to consider Jan's determination. I always felt despair watching others accomplish things I couldn't. Vincent sighed deeply, reflecting on his inability to protect his young master. Bianca teased him, so, do you want to apologize to that young master now? Vincent sighed again. Suddenly one day, I feel very sorry when the young lady teases this old man so cheerfully. The young lady was very childish, even teasing me with that name. Bianca realized only now that the elderly steward was aware of her teasing. Looking sincerely at Vincent, Bianca said, you should let go of those burdens, because you've always accommodated my requests. Vincent, still hesitant, Bianca continued, I have no reason not to forgive you either. You are a loyal steward of the Blanchefort family and a father figure who protected Zachary. Hearing these words, Vincent felt immensely happy. The image of the Grand Count suddenly appeared in Vincent's mind. Steward, Bianca relies heavily on you, he said. Vincent suddenly knelt down, looking up at his young mistress and earnestly advised, Mistress, you should leave Arno and run away. Bianca's expression changed abruptly, but she still couldn't abandon Arno after witnessing all the suffering the people here had endured. Vincent tried to persuade her once more, Mistress, please reconsider. Have you thought about surrendering to the second prince to save the people? Bianca suddenly jolted, turning away to avoid answering, but her series of expressions were transparent to the old steward. She blushed and exclaimed, but I've decided not to surrender. I will stand by the people until the end. Vincent pressed on, how long will defending the city last? Until everyone starves, or until you seek out the second prince yourself, or the day the people hand you over to him? The start of this battle was initiated by the second prince, but the determination to resist this attack belonged to the will of the people. Replacing this evil heart with a great spirit was not a difficult task. He took her hand, and with dignity said, Madam, please, if the Blanchefort forces cannot reach here, then run there, and ask the successor to plan for the future. Bianca's tears fell. Really? How can you advise me to escape so shamefully like that? Looking at the trembling lady, he continued, why should the will to live again become something shameful, and why must you prepare for death to become noble? Madam, why don't you think that Arno can only live if you live? Please, run away from this castle. Remember Arno's final courage and pass it on to future generations. On that day, Bianca had a premonition that she was having a long dream because she was in this castle. This reminded her of being cast out of her home and unable to reunite with him in her past life, a situation that seemed to persist now. Bianca reached out to catch the falling snowflakes. Even if I were to live again and try to make up for my mistakes, in the end, nothing could prevent what happened. After the royal army's catapult attack, all the injured were treated at the chapel. Gaspar, having sustained a head injury, was bandaged by Yvonne. Sir Gaspar, the steward, called him with a mournful expression. They exchanged a brief conversation. Shortly after, Vincent burst into tears. I knew before leaving, the Count entrusted Arno to you and asked you to protect the castle. But the only one who can safely escort the lady and Yvonne out of here is you. Please, take them away from Arno. Gaspar turned back to look at Yvonne and replied, Vincent, could you give me a moment? Yvonne moved closer and leaned into his chest, showing her reluctance to leave. Gaspar understood everything. Yvonne remained silent, but tears streamed down her cheeks. Gaspar tenderly kissed her forehead, saying, I should have proposed to you sooner. Suddenly, there was commotion from behind, and everyone turned towards the window. What's happening? A soldier called out. Sir Gaspar, it's the flag signaling a new army approaching Sevfranca. Gaspar gazed in that direction, his eyes widening. That's the national flag. The national flag? Has the king himself arrived here? Yvonne wondered aloud, who has come to aid us? In the room, Bianca also saw the flag. Several days earlier, when the royal army appeared, the dark-skinned girl with jet-black hair was Princess Navarre, the betrothed of Prince Albert, Princess Navarre. As she looked at the man calling her, none other than the Knight Butterfly Knight of Castile, he presented her with a handmade toy horse. Clip-clop, and the girl showed great excitement for the gift. At that moment, Odeli walked into the garden and spotted the two of them here. But her gaze had noticed the gentle and affectionate smile of the knight. In her heart, she suddenly felt warmly. Sorry for being late, Navarre, the lively girl exclaimed, Princess Odeli. Odeli happily said, now you can call me Aunt. Suddenly, she noticed something on the table. Is this it? The task I asked you to do? Although it's a bit rushed, you're quite nimble. Navarre blushed and covered her face in embarrassment. I tend to be hasty, so I usually prepare everything as soon as I'm asked. My mother always reminds me to fix that trait. Odeli was surprised. She lowered herself and comforted the girl. Even for royalty, a little laziness is fine. That's why Odeli, who has been lazy all her life, likes people who are quick and diligent like you. Hearing this, Navarre admired Odeli even more. The the betrothed of her future husband. Odell continued, "Can you help me with one more task? This is something we need to do quickly." As she said that, she turned and looked at the knight. Navari's letter was swiftly delivered to Prince Albert, passing through the hands of the servants, who all thought it was a pity that the prince and the princess had to be separated so soon after their engagement. Upon hearing the news, the letter was sent to Blanchefort, where someone had secretly opened it. But immediately, they froze in shock at what they found inside, a peculiar object. Before they could react, a sharp blade was pressed against their neck, and the knight growled, "How dare you break the seal of Castile? Who tasked you with this?" Odeli stepped forward to add, "You must be Prince Jacob, correct? I've always been curious, what does the thief who stole the letter from the palace look like? So it's you, responsible for the whereabouts of His Majesty." The reason Odeli could go this far was thanks to a letter from Bianca. She saw an opportunity to overthrow the influence of Prince Jacob. From the emperor's servants to the Grand Prince's gardeners and even those who served wine to the Grand Prince, all were his agents. Thus, both Gautier's death and Aragon's invasion were orchestrated by Prince Jacob. The emperor, lost in his thoughts, murmured, "Jacob, that rascal," then turned to ask, "Is Count Zachary d'Arnaud still alive?" Odeli replied, "Yes, your majesty. He will return after the battle concludes, supported by Count d'Aveville's army and the Knights Templar." "In that case, send military aid to Arnaud in your name," the emperor commanded, waving for his attendants. Odeli didn't immediately grasp her father's intention, but quickly realized he had given her the flag of Sevfranca. This revelation left her visibly surprised. The king solemnly declared, "Odeli, I appoint you as my successor. You shall be the new monarch of Sevfranca." The flag of Sevfranca fluttered in the wind as the royal army marched towards the territory of Arnaud. Everyone on the city walls anxiously watched the movements of the new troops. Bianca ran to Gaspa to inquire about the situation. It turned out that although they were both royal armies, the spears of the emperor's forces were aimed towards the camp of Prince Jacob. Roland, sensing the urgency, quickly informed Jacob, "Your Highness, you must flee. They are here to rescue Arnaud." Jacob smirked disdainfully, "Have I been betrayed again? By my own father." He stormed out of his tent and gazed towards the walls of Arnaud. While his soldiers fiercely fought against the emperor's army, he muttered to himself like a madman, "I told you, Bianca, the most fragile thing facing collapse is family." In less than half a day, the emperor's forces drove Prince Jacob's army out of Arnaud's territory. A knight stepped forward and asked, "Where is the countess?" No one dared to speak until Bianca was astonished to see that the knight was Joa, her own brother. Upon seeing his sister, Joa's face softened with relief, and he embraced her, trembling, "Oh Bianca, I'm so glad you're safe and sound. If the princess hadn't sent a maid to inform me of Arnaud's invasion, I might have left without you," he continued. Bianca exclaimed, "But Blanchefort is protecting Prince Anbert. I told you not to get involved in the war." Joa replied, "The situation is different now. For 10 years, neither father nor I have done anything for you. Do you know how much I feared losing you?" Touched by his words, Bianca welled up with tears. She hugged her brother tightly, apologizing and thanking him for coming. Suddenly, a group of strangers approached, clad in special armored suits with giant wings, their splendor leaving Bianca astonished. They walked up to her with faces full of admiration and reverence, saying, "We are the Knights Templar sent by the Holy See. It is a great honor for us, as Templar Knights, to meet and assist a saint such as yourself." Joa and Gasper exchanged wide-eyed glances. "A saint?" Gasper muttered. The knights referring to Bianca as a saint undoubtedly sparked surprise and curiosity among the people of Arnaud. They buzzed with discussion, wondering why the knights addressed her in such a manner. The villagers assumed the knights had come to offer aid or support, unaware that their lady was being regarded as a saint, a title not bestowed in centuries. In that moment, Bianca realized that the battle to defend this land and its rightful owner was truly a holy war. She bit her lip and continued, "Thank you all for coming, but I haven't achieved something important." She gripped her hands tightly and went on, "The reason I requested Archbishop Francis to send you all here was for the survival of my husband, not myself. Zachary." Both Templar knights looked at each other, and one of them said, "If you receive this, you'll understand immediately." Without delay, what caught Bianca's eye was her husband's lace handkerchief. Bianca's eyes widened as she recognized the item, trembling as she realized it was the promise she gave him that he would always return to her. "Zachary, my husband is alive," she exclaimed in indescribable joy. The elderly steward, Vincent, hurried over upon seeing his lady collapse, holding her husband's handkerchief. He too shed tears as he wept alongside her. All present felt a weight lifted upon learning their lord had not left them. When clearing the battlefield after the battle in Arno's territory, the body of Viscount Wigu was nowhere to be found. Soon, the nation would learn that Prince Jacob had colluded with the Aragonese invaders, causing this turmoil. Princess Odeli was poised to ascend the throne of Sevfranca. Gaspar told his master, if we raise the national flag, Prince Jacob's army won't attack them anymore. However, Bianca still felt uneasy. Without finding his body, it indicated he might still be alive, lurking around. We couldn't know what schemes he might still be plotting. Whether alive or dead, we must find out the identity of this second prince. Meanwhile, the army of Arno, alongside Count Zachary, hurriedly returned to their territory when suddenly Zachary startled as a figure blocked their path ahead. He immediately signaled the troops to halt. Robert shouted loudly, "Who are you? Get out of the way quickly." The figure slowly turned around, Zachary. His voice, a call Zachary could never forget, even in death, his own brother. Looking at Viscount Wigu's face, Zachary coldly commanded him, "Step aside. I know you colluded with Prince Jacob and trespassed into my territory. Regardless of our differences, I won't harm an unarmed man." Roland, undaunted, stepped closer to Zachary. He knelt down and pleaded humbly, "Zachary, I beg you. Prince Jacob is severely wounded in retreat. It may not concern your battlefield rules, but isn't he still the Emperor's remaining son? Please, Zachary, save Prince Jacob." Zachary hesitated for a moment, then dismounted and mockingly remarked, "You are truly loyal." Roland gripped his brother's shoulders firmly and continued coldly, "If you were truly loyal, you should have persuaded Prince Jacob to command the battle against Aragon, rather than leading a depleted defensive force to invade your younger brother's territory." With that, Zachary instructed Roland to lead the way to where Jacob was. Roland glared angrily at his disdainful younger brother and pointed in the direction, saying, "This way." At Arno Castle, a soldier suddenly caught sight of Bianca's figure and instinctively exclaimed, "Saint." However, he quickly corrected himself solemnly, "Ah, no, my lady, good morning." Passing by, another soldier stumbled similarly, "Saint." "Oh, no. My lady, I hope you had a peaceful night." Being repeatedly called a saint became increasingly bothersome for Bianca. Yvonne, however, empathized with them, saying, "If a saint they've only heard of since childhood suddenly appears before them, everyone would naturally be surprised, my lady. Don't worry too much, they'll get used to it." Bianca replied anxiously, "I hope so, isn't it every time they look at me like that?" Suddenly, loud noises echoed from somewhere. "Ahead is the Black Wolf banner, it's our army. Arno's troops have returned." The cavalry advanced into the fortress. Bianca couldn't help but fret, "Zachary, where is Zachary?" From this side, Sover recognized her, "My lady." Bianca approached, "Lord Sover, you've returned safely." Sover grimaced, "Ah, my lady. Your hair? Oh, never mind that for now. I heard you're called a saint, is that true?" The young man suddenly became embarrassed. "Even though I'm not religious, how is it that the person I serve is called a saint?" Bianca tried to interrupt the eccentric man, but Sover continued, "This is truly a pride of my lineage." Blushing, Bianca exclaimed loudly, "Sir Sover, where is the Count?" Only now did Sover look around bewilderedly. "Wait, the Count hasn't returned? We returned with the prisoners fleeing from the second prince. The Count and Robert left for Arno earlier, so they should have arrived first, shouldn't they?" Bianca's eyes widened in disbelief after hearing this. She trembled and asked again, "They left earlier? But why haven't they returned yet?" Sover furrowed his brow and glanced back. "Does that mean the current situation is not normal?" In the dungeon of Arno Castle, a man had freed himself from his bindings and escaped captivity. Quickly, he approached a grate and removed the bars. Inside, another person was cloaked from head to toe. This person glanced upward, where a girl stood on the balcony. It was none other than Bianca. "If you come out like this, you will catch a cold, Bianca." His voice was sorrowful. Bianca immediately recognized the voice. It was none other than the second prince, Jacob. She stepped back a bit, feeling uneasy. "On your way here, did you harm anyone?" Bianca questioned, her tone tense. Jacob chuckled, his eyes cold. "I'm not that reckless. I avoided the guards to get here." Bianca frowned, feeling displeased. "Then how do you explain the prank on Zachary on your way back here?" Jacob responded, his tone icy. "That was due to Viscount Wigu's scheming. I turned Roland's inferiority and jealousy towards his younger brother into loyalty to me. Viscount Wigu exploited those emotions to achieve his own goals. Count Arno became his target, and I directed him to carry it out. By now, Count Arno must truly be dead." Bianca sneered, disdain evident in her voice. "So you came to get me because you can't let me go?" Jacob's eyes grew numb. "My family has abandoned me. No one can help me, Bianca." Then he felt a surge of anxiety and anger. I'll have to be alone. If I can't even have my prize, how miserable will my death be? Bianca, furious, retorted, you don't care about my wishes or my life, you just want to have your way, don't you? How selfish. Jacob smiled again. That's right, but then his expression turned terrifying. Nothing can replace you, nothing can quench this hellish thirst except having you. Bianca was horrified by his desperation. I was willing to sympathize with you, but now I can't understand you at all. She looked at the lost soul before her and sighed, because of this, we can never be together. Suddenly, an arrow struck Jacob's shoulder. He was shocked and cried out, an arrow? Both Bianca and the second prince widened their eyes in surprise. I promised you, didn't I? That if I met the second prince on the battlefield, no matter what, I would kill him. Bianca exclaimed, Zachary. Jacob saw that Zachary was still alive and sneered, Count Arno, you're still alive. Earlier, when Zachary's group was surrounded by the second prince's forces, Roland had taunted, I never thought a national hero could be so easily deceived. But what he didn't know was that Zachary had anticipated the situation. A sharp blade was pressed against Roland's neck. It was Sover, who had ambushed his group from behind. Sover struck Roland's knees, forcing him to kneel, and Roland's face turned pale. Zachary's voice was steady, my army is not so foolish as to overlook the shallowness of someone unfamiliar with war. When Sover returned to Arno, he had timed it perfectly to ambush the second prince's forces and spread false information. Jacob hadn't expected that knight to be so cunning. Zachary suggested, step back, your highness. I won't miss my mark a second time. Jacob smirked and grabbed Bianca, using her as a shield. Zachary shouted in alarm, Bianca. The crazed prince cunningly spoke, don't misunderstand, Count Arno. I truly don't want Bianca to get hurt. You share the same sentiment, don't you? Zachary, his face veins bulging with anger, ultimately couldn't risk making any rash moves. Stay put until Bianca and I leave this castle. If you try to catch me and she gets hurt, it will be very awkward, won't it? Zachary gritted his teeth, helplessly watching them retreat. Ha, you're joking with me. Bianca's voice made Jacob halt. Do you think Zachary shares your thoughts? Are you trying to make me laugh? She grabbed Jacob's collar and yelled, how can a despicable coward like you, who uses women as shields, compare to my husband? With that, she swiftly plunged a small dagger into the second prince's side. Pain surged through him, and blood spurted from his mouth. Jacob staggered, questioning, why, Bianca? Why do something so dangerous? He clung to her until both of them fell backward, free-falling from the balcony. Zachary cried out in horror, Bianca. The fur cloak fluttered in the air, but its owner managed to cling to a balcony pillar, with Jacob still clutching her frail body below. Seeing the fur cloak lying disheveled on the ground, Jacob, exhausted and enduring the pain, asked, Bianca, can you die here with me? Bianca, struggling to hold onto the pillar, shouted, no way. If I wanted to die, I would have followed Zachary when I heard he was killed in battle. Jacob, panting heavily, managed to smile as he recalled a not-so-pleasant memory. Dear Jacob, his mother said, handing him a cup of tea and smiling, her demeanor filling him with fear. A woman was beaming brightly, but tears were streaming down her cheeks. Can you die with me? Jacob had immediately left his mother and that gloomy room. So that's how it is? Even if you heard that the Count had fallen in battle, you wouldn't die. For the first time in many years, he revealed his true self, a lonely and tormented soul. I thought, if two people truly loved each other, they could die together. But because of the Count, you didn't die, so you have no reason to die with me, do you? Jacob let go of her. He smiled through his tears and bid farewell to the woman he loved, goodbye, Bianca. The second prince lay beside the white fox fur that Bianca cherished. Seeing this scene, she closed her eyes tightly, feeling as if something was tearing at her insides, aching for him. I have to climb up, Bianca thought, but with her frail body, it was difficult for her to lift herself. Suddenly, a cold wind blew, and she felt as if she was being swept away by it. Struggling, she was fortunate that Zachary managed to pull her up just in time, breathing heavily at the thought of almost losing his wife. Bianca's eyes filled with tears as the two embraced after so many days apart. After that night, Bianca lay resting in her room, exhausted, while Zachary remained worried about her health. When Bianca opened her eyes, her husband was right in front of her. She immediately became somber, touching the scar on his left eye. Who dared to leave this scar on my handsome husband's face? She continued to pinch his cheek, questioning, is it really true that Zachary is still alive? He took her hand and kissed it. For the first time, I realized I am such a coward. I was afraid I wouldn't be forgiven by you, so I didn't die. Since we parted, it feels like there have been too many seasons that we couldn't be together in Arno, Bianca tightly held her husband's hand and revealed something. Now, there are 3 of us. The 3 of us will go through the seasons together in Arno. Zachary couldn't hide his happiness upon hearing this. He buried his head in her chest and held her tightly. The war had taken away family, villages, time, and many other things. But the people of Arno couldn't stop. As one season passed, another would come. They had to continue living on behalf of their deceased loved ones and neighbors. At the Blanchefort estate, while Joa was welcoming his sister, someone came running, Bianca. It was Catherine, who was extremely worried about her friend. Her husband, Count de Vovey, had been injured while aiding Arno's forces, so he had to recuperate at Blanchefort, and her brother Joa had taken his place on the battlefield. Catherine noticed her friend's hair had been cut short. Although she didn't know what had happened, she smiled and comforted her. Now we look alike. Bianca was very happy to have a friend who understood her so well. On the way into the Blanchefort mansion, Bianca thanked Catherine for convincing Count d'Aveville to send troops to support her husband. We are friends, Bianca. I thought if it were the other way around, you would do the same. Seeing their wives so close, d'Aveville smiled at Zachary and said, Look, Count. His wife's devotion made him feel a twinge of jealousy. How adorable they are. Seeing the wives' happy smiles means they're recovering, right? Suddenly, Zachary spoke. Thank you, because of the d'Aveville family's assistance, Arno was saved. Marceau wasn't too concerned since the war was nearing its end. He had fallen off his horse and injured his leg, but this allowed him to leave the army to Joa and be lovingly cared for by his wife. Marceau glanced downward and said, Indeed, I'm not suited for the battlefield. From now on, I won't participate in any more wars. I'll stick close to my lovely wife and live a long life. Zachary remained silent for a moment after hearing this. No one was truly suited for the battlefield. Count Blanchefort then spoke up. Is it true that Count Arno plans to go to La Hose alone, without taking Prince Albert with him? Zachary replied, The battle at Arno Castle resulted in the death of a prince from an empire. Even if Princess Odeli ascends the throne, she cannot disregard the royal bloodline. If I were to take Prince Albert with me, it would be akin to asking her to accept the death of the second prince and show leniency towards Prince Albert. I don't want to give that impression, and I accept the anger of the parents who have lost their child. As for Bianca, I hope you can find a way to dissuade her from returning to Arno. Can I rely on you for this? Gustavo recalled selling his daughter for a high price in a marriage of convenience. When he realized that he had committed an unforgivable act against Bianca, he found himself utterly repulsive. The father warmly agreed, I promise you, I will not hurt my daughter anymore. Zachary teased, If we could go back to the first time we met, you probably wouldn't have married Bianca to me, would you? Gustavo laughed heartily, Maybe not. Zachary continued, I'm sorry, but if we could go back to the past and Bianca still resented you, you would still have to give her to me. Because I can't imagine her not being my wife. That night, Zachary secretly left for La Hose without telling his wife. Robert, worried, asked, Are you really not going to see the lady? Zachary replied, I'll go back and explain to her later, and then urged Sauver to spur the horse forward. As Zachary casually entered the carriage, he was startled to find his wife sitting there all along. Zachary shouted, Sauver, stop the carriage. The knight didn't listen and instead urged the driver to go faster. Robert, standing nearby, could only wave goodbye. Unable to avoid it, Bianca noticed and began questioning. Inside the carriage, Zachary was wide-eyed as his wife gave him a sidelong glance and demanded he be her pillow for sleeping. Bianca, the royal physician said it. You're pregnant, so traveling long distances by carriage is very dangerous. Bianca nonchalantly responded, I made it to Blanchefort, so why can't I go to La Hose? She furrowed her brow resolutely. Don't use the baby as an excuse. If it's about the death of the second prince, I bear more responsibility than you. Zachary could only grit his teeth as he couldn't persuade her. Bianca took his hand and reassured him, Don't worry, this is the baby who has been with me until the war ended. Our child is very strong. So, I will go with you. The Earl of Arno and his wife's carriage continued straight toward the capital, La Hose. Zachary gently stroked his wife's hair while she slept. Bianca, like a small, obedient cat, lay quietly beside him. However, what awaited them was more troublesome than anything before. Sevfranca had lost 2 princes in succession, along with the ongoing war with Aragon, but the nobility of Sevfranca had no time to be bewildered by this string of sorrowful events. Princess Odeli's ability to govern the country had yet to be confirmed. Additionally, many criticized the second prince's act of espionage for the enemy nation Aragon, but he was skilled in diplomacy. Compared to other matters, diplomatic skills were essential, and people were not yet confident in Princess Odeli, who had always lived in the Lahoz palace and had little interaction with foreign countries. In a time when political marriages were a crucial force in the political arena, Princess Odeli's unmarried status left the nobility uneasy. They believed that since Prince Albert had married a princess from the allied nation of Castile, he had a higher chance of becoming the heir to the throne. Clink, a glass was set down hard on the table. Zachary spoke bluntly, the choice of who will inherit the throne is the prerogative of His Majesty the Emperor. If he were to hear these crude opinions of yours, he would consider it treason. The nobles cried out in fear, Count Arno, what treason? You're being unreasonable, we were just. Zachary shot them a deadly glare and snarled, just what? While our empire is still in turmoil after enduring an invasion by the enemy Aragon, you sit here drinking wine and defending a traitor. The nobles could not argue and were left speechless. Zachary continued, in the areas ravaged by war with Aragon, the people have to abandon their livelihoods to clean up the aftermath. If the country falls into crisis, it is the nobles' responsibility to ensure the people's survival. I think you should feel ashamed for being so indifferent. The nobles retorted loudly, you, merely a man from a viscount family, you dare speak so boldly. We are the ancient nobility of Sevfranca. Even if you are a war hero, you should not speak so arrogantly. Zachary clenched his fists, trying to contain the anger welling up inside him, but a gentle hand grasped his tightly. Don't forget, I'm always by your side. Bianca stood up to defend her husband. Her presence, a saint descended after hundreds of years, silenced the other nobles. They knew that opposing the Countess was tantamount to opposing the Holy See itself. She had the power to mobilize the entire Holy See to protect her husband, let alone a group of nobles who only knew how to talk. A while later, His Majesty the Emperor arrived. Bianca's heart ached at the sight of him. The once strong man now looked more frail and haggard than the last time she had seen him. When the Emperor settled into his seat, he immediately addressed the arrival of the Arno couple, coldly asking, Are you two ready to pay for Jacob's death? Zachary respectfully replied, Your Majesty, the second prince should have been captured and brought to justice. The responsibility for his death lies with me, Zachary de Arno. Before he could finish, Bianca interrupted, Your Majesty, the second prince died because of me. Zachary tried to stop her, but Bianca was determined to take all the responsibility. She trembled as she begged the Emperor to punish her and forgive her husband. Bianca, look up, the Emperor commanded. Bianca lifted her gaze to meet his. The Emperor smiled warmly and responded, How could I punish the benefactor of this nation? The Emperor continued to address the nobles, the heir to the throne, Odeli Sevfranca, will never marry. The princess has decided. Instead of marrying and having children, the princess will abdicate in favor of Prince Albert. She is currently on her way to Castile as the guardian of Prince Albert and his wife. She will also be the successor to the throne of Sevfranca and will discuss this matter with the Emperor of Castile. Odeli, aboard a ship with the Castilian knight known as the Night Butterfly, was approached by him. Is this your first time at sea, Your Highness? How do you find it? Odeli replied, It's quite different from playing in a small boat on the river. She turned and gazed out at the horizon. It's very frightening but also very beautiful. I used to think I wasn't an ambitious person. But when my brother Gautier died, and I received the letter revealing the second prince as a traitor, I felt a strange stirring within me. I realized I lacked information, connections, leadership skills, eloquence, and intelligence, everything. So, I decided to start with what I can do. Odeli turned to the knight and said, I want someone who can risk everything for me, for Odeli. The knight blushed at her words. Odeli continued, I want a bond stronger than that of lovers or spouses. I want someone who can give me more than just adoration and love. The two remained silent for a long time, then the knight finally spoke, for the princess, anyone would risk their life. Odeli moved closer to him and whispered in his ear, I want to give the person closest to me a chance, and then she started to walk away, adding, You can take your time deciding, it's still a long way to Castile, and I might change my mind by then. The knight clenched his hand tightly after hearing those words. Suddenly, Odeli stopped in her tracks, as a strong hand prevented her from leaving. The knight gently held her hand. Odeli was taken aback when he placed a tender kiss on her hand. A strange but joyful feeling welled up inside her. They stood there, gazing at each other for a long time, aboard the ship heading towards Castile on the other side of the ocean. Previously, in the private chambers of the Emperor, Odeli expressed her desire to travel alone to Castile for discussions on the inheritance of the throne and the marriage between Prince Anbert and Princess Navarre, a political maneuver for Castile. However, Princess Odeli asserted her claim to the throne, which contradicted Castile's stance. To appease the Emperor of Castile, Odeli wished to meet them directly, believing it would be more effective than sending someone else. The emperor relayed this to Zachary, surprised at his daughter's adeptness in politics. Had he known sooner, he could have supported the princess earlier and surrounded her with influential figures. By the way, I want to ask Duke Arno, though it's a bit late, to establish a solid foundation for Odelli, the emperor firmly instructed. On their way back to their domain, Bianca exclaimed in surprise, Your Majesty has elevated you to a duke? You're not of royal blood or a close relative of the emperor. And now you're no longer Duke Arno. Pointing to her husband, she nervously continued, You're now Duke Arno? Zachary tenderly replied, Exactly as Lady Jan, your foster mother, wished, Duke and Lady of the house. The emperor believes that as a close relative of the next king, the position of a duke is still insufficient. He said I am still young and not ambitious for power, and... Suddenly, Zachary hesitated, his uncertain expression leaving Bianca puzzled, until she seemed to figure it out, because you don't see Princess Odelli as a woman, right? The two looked at each other wide-eyed. Zachary teased, because she didn't react, I won't talk about that anymore. Seeing her not jealous makes me a little sad. After saying this, he chuckled mischievously, earning himself a few playful hits from Bianca. Really? Why do you have to act like a child? She scolded. Suddenly, Bianca paused, thinking that perhaps her purpose in this life was to witness the downfall of Arno and continue that legacy. However, Zachary comforted her, the fall of Arno is real, the Duke of Arno has disappeared and in his place is the Duke of Arno. It's not the prophecy our saint saw, but what she didn't see. Bianca felt a bit of sweetness in her husband's encouragement. She lifted his chin and corrected him gently, Not your saint, call me your duchess. Zachary smiled happily, As you command, my duchess. At the Arno estate, a young man hurriedly ran with something in his hands. The butler, Vincent, cheerfully greeted him, Nicholas, come in. Did you bring it? Nicholas, panting heavily, apologized for his delay. The butler did not blame him, knowing that Nicholas had been busy making a cradle for the soon-to-be-born lady. Inside the red box were 2 special candles, symbolizing the 2 main characters for the ceremony. Today, Vincent sighed in relief, well, the candles and flowers are ready, now we just wait for the main characters to finish up. Nearby, the heavy footsteps of a soldier echoed. Gasper stomped his feet and looked very tense. Robert felt sympathy for his friend, this is the first time I've seen Gasper like this. Sover also expressed his concern, I've heard of grooms fainting from nerves upon seeing their brides. Do you think he might faint? He looks like he's about to. Suddenly, a voice called out to the 2 men, Robert, Sover. Zachary waved them over, Come see me for a moment. In a secluded corner, Zachary began, You are all loyal to me, so I hope you won't feel upset or inconvenienced by this. The 2 men looked at each other, puzzled. After a brief conversation, they both waved it off, assuring Zachary they didn't mind. Gasper risked his life to protect Arno, the Duchess, and the heir. If I were you, I'd give him those gifts too. Besides, he's the first among us to get married. Zachary felt gratified to have such understanding confidants. In the bride's room, Yvonne was surprised to see the lace veil before her. Bianca, holding her pregnant belly, said, I worked hard to make this in secret before bed. Since you wouldn't leave my side, and every bride needs a veil, I made it for you. Yvonne trembled as she took the gift, feeling very happy to receive so many presents from her mistress on her wedding day. Bianca reached out for her maid's hand, Yvonne, haven't I told you? You are the most valuable and precious gem I have in this world. I want you to enjoy a perfect marriage. Yvonne, with tears in her eyes, replied, My lady, this veil will be an heirloom passed down through generations, along with the sable coat. I will definitely have a daughter. Bianca could only sigh in admiration. After giving her maid the gift, Bianca left, promising to see Yvonne at the ceremony. Outside the room, Zachary was waiting to welcome her. Suddenly, he felt a pang of jealousy. Yvonne is the most valuable and precious gem in the world? Sometimes, I feel like you love Yvonne more than me. Bianca couldn't help but smile at her jealous husband. She gently patted him and teased, You jealous thing, I've told you before that you can't put a price on my love. Zachary blushed and frowned, So you mean I shouldn't get jealous anymore, right? Bianca waved him closer and whispered, Actually, I find it adorable when you get jealous, so I've been enjoying it a bit lately. The couple giggled together, radiating happiness. Please, be jealous like this from time to time, she said playfully. In the banquet hall, everyone was eagerly waiting for the bride, Yvonne, but no one was more nervous and tense than Gasper. Suddenly, a little girl spotted someone. The bride is here. Gasper's cheeks turned red as he turned around, and Yvonne slowly approached him, looking as nervous as her groom. Gasper held his breath as she stood before him. His hands trembled as he lifted her veil, revealing Yvonne in all her radiant beauty. Sover, standing nearby, was ready. Gasper, if you faint, I'm here. Just lean back, and I'll catch you. But that wasn't necessary. Gasper was overwhelmed with happiness, and to his surprise, tears began to fall. Ivan, also tearing up, wiped away his tears and smiled reassuringly. Following the priest's guidance, they exchanged wedding rings in front of everyone. Finally, they shared a vow-bound kiss, promising, this love will endure forever, through sorrow, illness, and old age. Sover could hardly contain himself at the sight of such a beautiful moment. Bianca, too, was overjoyed for the couple. The celebration continued with music and dancing. While the bride and groom greeted guests, Zachary stood up to make an important announcement. Last winter, Arno endured a colder season than any before, but thanks to everyone here and our departed family members who always protected Arno, we can now celebrate the beginning of a new couple's life together. He continued, having overcome those hard times, the Count's territory is now the Duke's territory. We've developed this place, thanks to the Archbishop's recommendation. Today, on this joyous occasion, I want to give Gasper and Ivan a wedding gift. Both the bride and groom were taken aback but stepped forward to receive this honor. I bestow upon you the title of Baron and a territory. Gasper looked at his wife in astonishment. Ivan had always felt insecure about her lowly status. He could have chosen a noblewoman of higher rank, but Gasper didn't care. He believed, if I were of higher status, I'd never have met the Count to serve him. Gasper turned and continued, of course, I wouldn't have met you either. He gazed at Ivan lovingly. You are the one I worry about, even if you had to marry a man with no inheritance like me. You could marry someone with a better background than me, and your life would be a bit better. In that case, you could provide a good environment and honor for our children, Gasper said. Ivan reached out, gripping his hand and said, just passing down honor and living beside my lady and the Lord is enough for me. Gasper smiled gently, kissed her forehead, and hugged her tightly. In the present, the two looked at each other with surprise and joy. Sover and Robert happily embraced the groom, congratulating the new Baron. Congratulations, Gasper, your late father would be so proud. Bianca and Zachary were also very pleased to see the couple so happy. Gasper said, thank you, Duke, for granting me this honor. Suddenly, Ivan placed a hand on his shoulder as if signaling something. He nodded in agreement. Duke, could you postpone granting us the title? I still have much to learn about governing a territory, and my wife and I still have duties to fulfill in Arno. Everyone around was surprised, including Zachary. Ivan added, yes, Duke, I still want to serve the lady and the young mistress after she gives birth. We hope to both serve you and the lady while learning the responsibilities of governing a territory. Zachary and Bianca exchanged surprised looks as Ivan spoke calmly. Zachary said, if it's about learning to govern a territory, you'll learn faster from the steward. Isn't he the one who practically rules Arno? Vincent, embarrassed by the praise, nodded. Bianca approached Ivan, taking her hand, and said, I felt so lonely since my nursemaid passed away. So, as my child's nursemaid, you must stay healthy and happy. Ivan, unable to hide her joy, reassured her, my lady, don't worry, my specialty is staying strong. In the pouring rain, someone hurriedly ran inside the holy cathedral. A priest respectfully invited the person inside, saying, it's Archbishop Francis. He entered a room, looking very worried. The person waiting for him was the Pope of the Francis Cathedral. The Pope seemed afraid of this man. The man spoke first, since you've become a cardinal, you've been taught more sacredly, right? Indeed, with just one look, you can recognize a saint. Francis, sweating profusely, showed humility. You also heard, the Pope has appointed Thomas as the Archbishop of the Arno territory. The man did not hesitate to praise the talents of this Thomas. However, Arno is not an ordinary place, it is the residence of a saint. Currently, Francis, the man cast a cold glance at him. According to Archbishop Thomas, that person has not awakened yet. Miracles are the proof of a saint. Francis turned pale and scared. About that? He hurriedly tried to cover up. Saint Bianca was supposed to die according to the prophecy of the future, but her husband, the Count of Arno, no, the Duke of Arno, hasn't died yet. Isn't that a miracle? The man sighed, you know well, things don't happen that way. Francis could only lower his head and smile nervously. The man explained, apart from the stigmata appearing during prayer, it must be a miracle that everyone can recognize as performed by a saint, and it must come true. But so far, no miracle from Saint Bianca has occurred. Moreover, it's problematic that a saint is involved in the war between two nations, and the Holy Knights must intervene and side with Sevfranca. Consequently, we've given the loyal followers of Aragon a reason to turn their backs on their faith. Francis felt as though he had done something wrong after hearing this. The man continued, if Saint Bianca's miracle doesn't happen soon, people will think the method of performing miracles is flawed. The war between the two nations should have ended once, but no one can be sure it won't happen again. The saint's husband is the leader of the Sevfranca army. Think about it, if the war continues, will the cathedral send the holy knights to side with Sevfranca again? From Aragon's perspective, isn't that enough reason for them to oppose the cathedral? Francis couldn't voice any objections, as he was also worried about the issue. Although he had acknowledged Bianca as a saint, without the occurrence of her miracle, he began to doubt his own judgment. His mind was filled with the fear that one day, the cardinal's seat would vanish. The man placed a hand on Francis's shoulder and spoke gently, although I am from Aragon, in faith, there is no distinction between nations. I am committed to following the laws of the Church and sacrificing for my beliefs. I also understand that the emergence of a saint is the best way to avoid sacrificing many lives on this continent. But, he gripped Francis's shoulder tightly and spoke with anguish, every time I think about our country, I doubt the very God deep within my heart. Francis, though empathetic, was at a loss for words. The man continued, pray for me, for I am leaving, my brother. To prove that Sevfranca's victory is what everyone desires, and hopefully, we will soon witness the miracle of Saint Bianca. That night, in the Arno estate, Bianca was engrossed in admiring the rare black pearls, marveling at them with joy. These were a gift from Catherine. Alongside the black pearls, her friend had also sent a wool coat, but Bianca was only interested in the pearls. Madam, shall I dry your hair for you? Asked Yvonne. No need, Bianca replied. Tonight is your wedding night. If I keep you up late, Gasper will blame me, and besides, it's summer, so the nights are short. Yvonne blushed as her lady gently shooed her away. Good night, madam, she said, leaving reluctantly. As she stepped out, her cheeks turned red again at the sight of Gasper waiting to escort her home. He seemed eager for what the night would bring, and Yvonne glanced at him shyly before they walked away hand in hand. Meanwhile, Bianca was reading Catherine's letter and learned that her friend was pregnant. Catherine's husband, Count d'Aveville, had insisted she stay home and not travel to Arno, as he couldn't bear the thought of her risking herself and had been losing weight over it. Consequently, Catherine couldn't visit Bianca and had sent the gifts instead. As Bianca read this, her eyelids grew heavy, and she drifted off to sleep. Someone gently stepped forward and began to dry her damp hair. Only her husband, Zachary, would be so tender. He picked up the letter and continued reading where Bianca had left off. It has always been that young wives often die during childbirth, the letter said. The mother of Lord Arno and your own mother were the same. After giving birth, they turned away from the world with their newborns in their arms. Zachary's face tightened as he read on. Because of this, Lord Arno has always been troubled, growing more anxious and guilty as the birth approached. One afternoon, a child was born in the Arno castle, but the mother was not as fortunate. Yvonne covered her mouth, weeping, and Zachary was devastated as he watched his wife stop breathing on the sickbed. In that moment, his world collapsed. Under the night sky, a star fell to the continent, landing in a snowy field. Bianca lay there motionless, her eyes opening to an unfamiliar sight. She instinctively touched her unusually flat belly and, in a panic, searched for her baby, unaware of someone approaching from behind. Don't worry, my child, your baby was born safely, said a man with a familiar face. Bianca widened her eyes and murmured, but you died before my eyes. Who are you really? The man, resembling Jacob, smiled warmly. You can't remember, but we have met before. When you wake up from that dream, the man before you will not be me but Zachary de Arno. I mean the dream where you vomited blood and died. Bianca found herself in another realm, transforming into a beggar amidst a landscape of embers and black smoke. The man spoke again, when we guide the departed to the next dream, we appear as their deepest guilt. Tears streamed down Bianca's face as she whispered, the departed? The man revealed, you had a difficult birth and lost a lot of blood. Bianca wept and frowned in frustration. Why did I have to die, feeling guilty for him? If it were Zachary and the baby, I would understand, but why him? The man answered, if he hadn't met you, he might not have died. Don't you feel pity that he passed away without experiencing true love? Bianca couldn't argue, but she recognized the man only as a guide, appearing as someone she felt guilty toward. You have fulfilled your role remarkably, he said. Because of this, the world is now set on the right path. Bianca asked, do you mean my saving Zachary? Indeed, the man replied. This could only happen while your husband was alive. It is the child of you too. The fact that the child was born into this world is the most ideal future we envisioned. That child will grow to become the greatest person on the continent. Bianca was extremely surprised. Our child will be the greatest person on the continent? The man stood up and extended his hand invitingly. Now let's go. You have created the flow we desired, so you have the right to dream the dream you want to go to. Like the dream where your mother is. Bianca's eyes widened as she saw two women in the heavens. One was her nursemaid Jan, and beside her was a blonde woman. Bianca recognized that woman from when she was a little girl. She and her brother Joa had gazed at the portrait of that woman hanging on the wall. Yes, the woman with the blonde hair and blue eyes, she was the gentlest person Bianca had ever known, her beloved mother. But Bianca stopped herself and touched her flat belly. Remembering the desperate time, when she was enduring the assaults of the Second Prince's army, she had complained, determined to raise her child alone and accept not having her husband by her side. But if her child was left without a mother, Bianca felt heartbroken for that child. Would my child want to meet me, even though I've come here? Though I live till now, I never left any portrait, because that person took the only one I had. She teared up. My child, they won't recognize me. Bianca jumped up and shouted, I want to go back, take me to where Zachary and my baby are. The man frowned slightly. This is a bit difficult, my dear. Your heart has stopped beating. If you want me to bring you back to that dream, you have to create a miracle that wasn't planned. Bianca wasn't willing to accept it. Not long ago, I had to come back to life to give birth, and now it's impossible for me to come back to life to continue living? Killing a 19-year-old girl, then reviving her, and then killing her again. Why do you keep doing things your way? My husband had to use contraception because having a baby when I was too young would endanger my life. You didn't even care about that. The man still tried to respond, but your child was born for the good of this world. Bianca angrily retorted, so what? I'm dead, and you think I would be grateful because my child will be exceptional in the future? You pretend to respect me and feel uneasy about my wish to return to my husband and child. Don't you find that hypocritical? I never wanted to go back to the past. I was so scared and in pain when I failed at 18. You don't care about that, do you? Even if I'm honored as a saint, you didn't give me any power. It's not anything special. You just need to bring this Bianca back home. The man was startled and then smiled gently. You misunderstood. We do not force and entrust this to someone without will, Bianca. We have always thought it was fortunate that it was you. In the space filled with burning flames and thick black smoke, Bianca trembled and pointed straight at the man, declaring, I will try, I will definitely save that man. Because you did not hesitate to choose despite your fear. You will forget our meeting again, but can you remember this, Bianca? Even knowing your own shortcomings, you are still full of courage and always move forward. That is your greatest innate ability. A loud sound tore through the mystical space. In the real world, Yvonne was very surprised when she stepped out of the window and marveled at the wondrous sight before her, stars shooting up from the ground and flying into the sky. All the people of Arno were astonished by this majestic event. It sounded as clear as the clinking of countless glass jars. The melody created stars that seemed like a blessing to everyone witnessing the scene. Finally, the miracle has happened, Your Holiness. Caressing his wife's face, her breath had ceased, but he still held her tightly, praying that the miracle would bring his wife back to him. Despite all the ups and downs, Arno Castle remained a peaceful haven for its people. In a corner of the garden, a small hand stained with the crimson juice of wild strawberries gripped the plump, sweet berries. As the child happily indulged in them, a sudden realization dawned upon her. The little girl, with mischievous blue eyes, looked up at the sky in astonishment. Oh no! Gaston, wake up! The sun is already high, we need to go back. Still bewildered, the boy was pulled along by his friend. Wait up, Alex, let's go together. The two children hurriedly ran into the fortress and accidentally bumped into the steward. If you keep running around like this, one day you'll get hurt, admonished the steward. The kids shouted a quick sorry, sir, before darting away. Alex, Gaston, they heard a call and cheered, Mother. Mom. Yvonne was surprised to see them so carefree. She quickly gathered the children while catching her breath. If you keep running like this, you'll get scolded even more. Oh, but we're already late, Alex protested. The little girl just squinted her eyes as Yvonne wiped away the red stains around her mouth. Oh heavens, I told you that if you eat wild strawberries until you're full, you'll fall asleep, Yvonne grumbled. Alex pouted, but, Mother. We eat them every day. How can you expect us to resist? Right, Gaston? The boy nodded quietly as his mother gently wiped his mouth, he being the quieter one of the two. Yvonne smiled gently as she cared for the two children. Upstairs, Gaspa watched them with a peaceful expression. Yvonne hugged the two little ones affectionately. All done, you two. Hurry along now. Gaston chased after Alex, waving goodbye to his mother. A moment later, Robert looked at the two children sternly, arms crossed. You two are late. The kids could only show apologetic faces and apologize to their teacher. But Robert still punished them by making them run laps around the training yard. Those who can't keep small promises, how can they become knights? Robert remarked firmly. Seeing Robert being strict with the children, Sover called out, "Be gentle with them, there's still your horseback riding class." Robert blushed slightly in response. "Today, I just asked them to run. They've been playing by the stream since early morning, so they must be tired." That evening, as Yvonne tucked Alex into bed, the little girl begged her foster mother to continue the story. Yvonne happily resumed telling the tale, recounting the day Alex was born and the rumors of a miracle that spread throughout the lands of Sevfranca and Aragon, reaching across continents. Not long after, Princess Odeli returned to her homeland and ascended to the throne. After years of conflict along the Sevfranca border, Aragon officially surrendered. While picking roses in the garden, Odeli decided that the responsibility for war reparations should fall on Duke Arno. Despite knowing he couldn't leave Alex alone at home, she hoped he would accept this. Zachary bowed respectfully. "As you command." Following that day, the Duke stayed by the Queen's side to oversee the conclusion of the conflict with Aragon. However, this matter proved more complex than he anticipated. Seeing the Duke troubled, Marceau reminded him of a secret weapon at his disposal, though it didn't sit comfortably with his conscience. Wasn't this the perfect opportunity to use that weapon? Zachary understood the Count's meaning but furrowed his brow in deep thought. Ultimately, he had to deploy that secret weapon, acting as an envoy to Aragon. "I apologize for requiring you to leave our child behind and undertake this journey to Aragon." Bianca gently stepped down from her horse, still radiantly beautiful and elegant as ever. As he escorted her, she gently chided her husband for needing to do this after so many years. During negotiations, Zachary exerted significant pressure on Aragon regarding the war reparations. When Bianca, revered as a saintly figure, appeared at the meeting to demand accountability from Aragon, they knew they couldn't delay any longer. The treaty between the two nations was then promptly signed. "Thank you, Bianca. It is thanks to you that we were able to swiftly conclude the matter of war reparations," he said. Bianca replied, "Thank you would suffice, but I do want a gift from my husband." Zachary blushed slightly, knowing exactly what she had in mind. He chuckled softly and reached out to embrace his wife tenderly. At this point, we should probably draw the curtain. After their intimate moment, Bianca noticed her husband seemed thoughtful. Zachary gazed lovingly at her face and said, "I'm remembering the day I lost you. Everyone was amazed and prayed for the success of that miracle. The greatest surprise in my life has always been you." Bianca smiled gently, and the two held each other close as they rode back to their homeland of Sevfranca. If marriage were a business transaction, then their marriage for mutual benefit would have completely failed, because in this business, love has no form and it's merely an emotion that can't be measured in terms of gains and losses. However, their marital life includes both love and happiness. This makes their story much more beautiful than many other couples. Many tales about the child of the Grand Duke of Arno and the first Empress of Sevfranca, who unified the continent, have become songs of Alexandra's nanny's tales. Arno territory later became a major industrial hub for lace-making, bringing considerable wealth to the region. The development of the lace industry elevated the reputation of the boy Nicholas, known as a master sculptor. This can be considered one of the greatest achievements of Duchess Bianca of Arno City. Among Nicholas's sculptures, many depict Bianca's accomplishments, reflecting his special affection for Saint Bianca. Does this story with such a gentle ending satisfy you? I still have many questions about it. However, we can discuss them in future conversations or videos. Thank you and see you again.